What is up, guys? It is time for a little MLB deeper dive. And for all you baseball fans who've been dying, angry, livid at the amount of NBA we've had on the channel, today is a day for you because it's a deeper dive. And then it'll also be a live before lock show with Greg Ehrenberg and Eric Lindquist right after this one. So stay tuned for that. But I am Chris Spags, joined by a man who's never being spied on by adware, a man who's always above board. And check out some of his your data sheet, I thought, Gundacker, on Twitter. A lot of fun, very similar to what I'm doing. So I'm going to support it completely. But it's Gundacker. How you doing, buddy?
All day baseball coverage, man. It's a nerd's dream. I'm glad to be a part of it.
It's the dream. We are living it today, and we're also living it because of our friends over at Jock Market, who are, of course, turning fantasy sports to a stock exchange where you can forget about waiting till the end of the game to make money. Jock Market's going to allow you to buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money with guaranteed payouts for all shares at the end of each night. They have daily markets for the NBA, MLB, NHL, and PGA. You can make real money every hour, every minute, every second of any match or game, every inning, I would say as well. Use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players and buy, sell, or hold them during the game based on your analysis. Download the app to get started and use our exclusive Awesemo promo code of Awesemo for $50 deposit bonus on your first deposit. Is an exclusive offer only for the Awesemo community, so make sure to take advantage of it today. That is Awesemo for a $50 bonus over at Jock Market, Jock MKT. So check them out on wherever you can get them, on all the app stores, and go to the website as well. Gundacker, any overarching thoughts for you here on the slate before we get game by game? It's one where the pitching, I think there are some interesting options, some chalk options as well that are going to be dominating the field, it looks like, in terms of ownership. So any thoughts you have, feel free to throw them out now.
Yeah, I guess the big elephant in the room is Brandon Woodruff and Coors. And it seems like we get to that point of the year where you start getting above average pitchers in Coors, and then you really start to weigh how much you fear 90-degree high elevation baseball and against a weaker Rockies lineup. So I'm curious to see where Woodruff does end up. We didn't really get like a Coors Field discount, so I don't think he's going to be egregious. But I also feel like I don't know that the Rockies are going to be a sought after stack. So it's one of those spots where the field doesn't make a decision. Maybe I force myself to make one.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and definitely the pitchers in Coors today, Herman Marquez as well, going to be a little more live than you might normally be to play, but we'll get to that game in a little bit here. Let's start with the Yankees getting 5.3 implied runs against TJ Zike. Guys, hit that like button if you can as well, and subscribe to the channel. Check out all the content we have going on that helps out a bunch, and I forgot to mention that before getting into the game by game, but the Yankees going against Zike. Zike, a player who's projected for 1% ownership today. Already some jokes in the chat. I mentioned that I went game by game this morning on the MLB strategy show, and I'm just going to say the opposite of whatever I said this morning, and that would definitely include playing a ton of TJ Zike, but obviously being sarcastic. Do not play TJ Zike today. He is terrible. 10.5% K rate, 320 batting average allowed this year. Since 2019, a 260 batting average and a 14.3% K rate. It's just kind of a bad middle of the league pitcher instead of a guy who's quite as awful as he's been this year. But Gundacker, he is a guy who's given up a low launch angle, 8.6 degrees. The barrel ball rate, though, 18.2%, very high. And it's going to be a short porch day playing for Toronto in Buffalo. So the Yankees, I feel like an appealing stack to get to. The ownership shockingly low, I think, on the top stack. Still much higher probability of being a top stack today with 14% chance. So how are you feeling with the Yankees against TJ Zike?
Yeah, so this is probably going to be closer to a bullpen game than anything. Michael King and Zoik probably both going 4 or 5 innings, and 5 is probably on the high end. So I actually think both offenses are very, very viable. Zoik's weaknesses is the Yankees' strength. The power to righties is a problem, especially for guys with no strikeouts in their DNA, and we have not seen the strikeout for Zoik ever. So definitely a great spot for the Yankees bats to take advantage of this. Obviously, you can get suckered into a bunch of flyouts with it being a little under 70 degrees. But yeah, Yankees profile extremely well for power in my bomb detector. It is just a slew of your usual suspects: Aaron Judge, Gary Sanchez, and Carlos Stanton. So that sounds extremely basic, but I think this is actually a day where that lines up with the metrics that we have. And then the Blue Jays bullpen definitely has a couple pieces that I can continue to pick on. And they've kind of fallen from the first quarter of the season into the last couple of weeks. The Blue Jays bullpen has definitely been not their strength, and it's actually allowed the Yankees, for instance, yesterday to come back. And I'm there on the Yankees. I also think, like I said, the Blue Jays are viable, but the Yankees bullpen is a little bit stronger. They've had a really good bullpen, and they re-added Zach Britton to the mix. Now, Britton didn't look super sharp in his last appearance, so I'm not ready to crown him as the the elite Orioles guy, but Chad Green, Britton, Loisaca, Chapman to close it. This is a game that could get cut in half in terms of solid at bats if King can last 4 innings. So I'm more on the Yankees than the Blue Jays, but I think both teams are very viable.
In the Yankees too, just one prop to point out here. Of course, you can always get your MLB props over at oddshopper.com or oddshopper.awesemo.com if you have the old URL saved like I do, and that's the one it goes to every time. But the prop for Gary Sanchez today, plus 420. Obviously, I think we're all going to enjoy that number in general, but a plus 420 odd to hit a home run against TJ Zike. I mean, Gary been running hot. Not that matters too much to me, but a guy who's also got the best launch angle on the team, high exit velocity, park factors here. Not, as Gundacker mentioned, not the greatest weather here. You definitely like to see a little more humidity in Buffalo, but 45% humidity, 67 degree weather. I don't really care that much because the porch is so short that I think that's going to be something that's going to help out Gary. So in the spot, to me, I like that prop bet, and I think a solid DFS play, a little bit overpriced, but there's some ways you can get to the Yankees too and get less ownership with guys like, to me, Gleyber Torres. The power hasn't been there. Maybe you don't want to go there, but Giancarlo Stanton being another 10% owned, like there's a lot of upside there. And I think the fact, he hasn't had the home runs recently or, within the last few games, people sometimes forget that he's just that monster bat. So a lot of ways to go here. And I'm with you. I think the Yankees more appealing than Toronto. I guess if you had to go Toronto, though, they do look a little bit under on the top stacks tool. So if you were to play any of the Blue Jays today, I guess which bats you prioritize? Because I feel like similarly as I do for Giancarlo Stanton, a very low owned Vladimir Guerrero Jr. seems like an interesting spot to go to today, given the power we know he has. And he has slate breaking upside, 161 WRC plus over the last season and change.
Yeah, Vladdy is arguably the best player in the game right now offensively. And it's really not that hard of an argument to make. So I would never push back on him. I want to see that lineup come out. I don't want to over speculate, but at the end of yesterday's game, Vladdy had a real awkward play where he essentially got picked off on third base. He ran on contact and Gary gunned him down at third. He made a very awkward dive for third base. There really was no sign of injury, but them not having a lineup out yet, I'm kind of curious. This is the first game, so I'm expecting something different. And whether or not it's Vladdy, we'll see. But kind of keep an eye on that. But yeah, Vladdy's definitely at the top of my list in terms of Blue Jays to target. And then maybe a Marcus Semien. He jumped on Garrett Cole in the first at bat yesterday. He's been pretty solid as their leadoff guy.
Semien definitely not somebody who's historically been thought of to have a lot of power. I don't feel crazy about the $5,100 price tag, but he's definitely been hitting home runs pretty well over enough of a period of time now, and historically does have a 217 ISO against right-hand pitching. So yeah, I'm with you. I think there's some players who rather are going to be worth taking stabs at on Toronto, but guys that, again, look mostly appropriately owned. So try to keep that in mind with the stack. Next game up, we got the Cubs getting 3.3 implied runs against Marcus Stroman. And Marcus Stroman's ownership has actually come down from where it was when I was talking about this with Eric Lindquist this morning on the MLB Strategy Show. But Stroman now at 20% expected ownership, and I get he is a price point pivot to show Ohtani. I'm going to be repeating some takes here, so if you watch the morning show, my apologies, but it hasn't changed for me throughout the day. I think Stroman unlikely to kill you today. Maybe he does find his way to a few extra strikeouts going against a Cubs team with a 25.5% carry rate on the year against right-hand pitching, and the lineup they're going to have out there today, 26% carry is what I have them at overall. But I just don't see Stroman being a guy worth 150 your lineups tonight. I think you can get some of him if the price point works, and you can sort of chop it up with a lot of these guys in the 8K range. But Gundacker, do you feel it for Stroman here? Like, it's an okay projection, but this is the kind of play that, to me, I don't normally feel like gets 20% ownership, and I'm kind of surprised by overall.
8,600 on DraftKings. If I think you can knock on the door of over 20, I definitely am going to lean on you. And then if you get over 25, I think it's viable. Definitely not something I would be warm and fuzzy about. Maybe you can put some logic in the fact that they might look at Stroman to eat a strong part of this game after deGrom only lasted 3 innings yesterday. The Mets bullpen saw Drew Smith, Sean Reed Foley, Trevor May, Aaron Loop, and Miguel Castro all throw between 11 and 38 pitches. So they definitely might ask Stroman to go deep enough. And maybe if he gets through like a 7-inning game with, 5 strikeouts and a dub, maybe it does reward 8,600 on DraftKings. So like, I understand it, but I'm with you. It's not one of those flashy plays for me, but a really high ground ball rate, a guy that can probably be at least a serviceable SP2 I could 20%. Looking at some of these other options, I can understand it, but yeah, I'm with you. It's not something like I wake up in the morning to play Marcus Stroman.
Yes, I would agree with that very much. And yeah, I'm just surprised by that much ownership for him because the fantasy numbers aren't really there. Strikeouts are going to be what's usually worth the weight in gold. And the thing too for Stroman is he's not throwing enough pitches really for me to feel the most comfortable. If he's this guy doing what he does, getting outs, getting ground balls, as Gundacker's talking about, not giving up home runs, but he's throwing, 95 pitches per appearance, I feel like a little more comfort there. But 81 per appearance is not enough for me to get there. And I think if you shaved off 10% of Simeon or of Stroman and started to share it around to some other guys, I think it's a pretty wise move on the slate. So that's where I'm landing with it. And also Hugo in the chat mentioning the DeGrom. I guess we scared some people off of playing too much DeGrom yesterday. It is wild though that he got 8 strikeouts in 3 innings. I just feel like we need to mention that because there's no other time to do it. But the man hurt himself. That is outrageous numbers. And a guy clearly has no issue with not using spin tack or spider tack or whatever that stuff is.
Yeah, at 70 to 80% own a lot of my contests with him having over 20. I never actually felt dead with my DeGrom lineup. So with him having like 22 or something like that, incredible. Like he's literally the best pitcher on the planet. So I hope he's fine. But it just felt like his last couple starts, every time he leaves, I feel like he's hurt. And at least yesterday was for sure something. But sounds like it's nothing. It sounds like they're gonna let him keep pitching and let him be Jacob DeGrom, which hopefully doesn't blow up on him.
This is like a quick tangent real fast, and I promise I'll get right back on track with the Cubs hitters, who honestly are probably not going to look the most appealing for me. But do you think and I haven't looked at the numbers, so this is something that I never tracked, but I remember growing up in the Pedro Martinez Red Sox years were the ones where everybody's like, he's an MVP. Do you think his numbers are, and you might actually know this because I know you are a deep dive on this kind of stuff, Gundacker, but do you think his numbers were as good as we're seeing this year from DeGrom? Because I imagine they can't be.
Do I think he's this good?
Well, no. Do you think like Pedro's numbers were where we're seeing DeGrom at, like right now, without looking it up?
I don't know if we've ever seen somebody come close to what DeGrom's done in his like last 10 game stretch is actually insane. I think you could always like asterisk for the time period, like inflation, if you will, as talent gets better, but. Yeah, I think we're witnessing something special with DeGrom. So I really hope he isn't going to get really hurt.
Yeah, same for me. And I actually might do some research on that on Fangraphs later because I'm curious. But Pedro doing that in the Royd era, maybe that gives him a little bit of a boost. But Cubs hitters, I don't find the most interesting. The one thing that stands out to them, they are projected for 1% ownership as a stack. But Stroman, just one of those guys, doesn't give up a ton of power. There's really nothing to point to. 2.6% on run rate is well under league average, and a low ground ball or high ground ball rate, low fly ball rate. So the stuff to me, Gundacker, I feel like the Cubs, maybe you want a little bit just because nobody's going to be there, but I just don't see the logic.
Yeah, more so a leverage or contrarian stack, even if you ended up investing in Stroman. One thing about the Mets bullpen, I have one of the stats I've been using since it's kind of hard to predict bullpens because you never truly know who comes out. I've been leaning on the stat plus stat. So like bullpens, K percentage plus, walk percentage plus, basically compares the overall body of work for the bullpen versus league average. And the Mets bullpen home run per nine is actually 73, which means it's almost 30 points below league average. So even after a high ground ball guy like Stroman gets out, you're not necessarily projected to hit a bunch of long balls off of this Mets bullpen. So I could probably eliminate the Cubs if I'm, working on 20 lineups and would probably only get there in like 150 when I am looking for a little bit of leverage.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that's something I track too. The Mets bullpen on the year, 3.7 xFIP, 27% K rate, home run rate, like you're hinting at 2.2%. So they have not given up a lot of production on the year and doesn't seem like the kind of situation either. Not a great humidity day, certainly a park that's not playing fantastic for power. Not a great Cub stack today, other than the leverage you could get potentially against Stroman. That's, again, not the best leverage anyway. Kyle Hendricks on the other side, not going to be as owned, about 6% ownership expected for him on DraftKings. And a guy who's been just even worse than he's been historically, an 18% K rate, 6% on run rate. The Mets stack, I know losing to a girl was tweeting, replying to your show tweet, Gundacker, about how the Mets stack wins it all. Going against Hendricks, I think certainly can be profitable. The one thing that jumps out to me, though, is that he's not a guy who's going to give up a ton of bombs, I would think. The 6% on run rate has been there this year, but historically 3.5%. Launch angle still not that high, 10 degrees allowed. Barreled ball rate not that high either at 11%. I think Kyle Hendricks is not good, but I don't know he's a guy that I'm dying to stack either. And it does seem like the top stack tool seems to be buying in on Kyle Hendricks a little bit more. 2.4% chance of the Mets to be a top stack today. That's not going to get it done, Gundacker, but do you feel any differently?
Now, I mean, for some reason, results-wise, the home run ball has been against Kyle Hendricks this year. But whenever I see like a spike in home run per nine from one year versus the last, I tend to look at the like a fly ball, hard contact, stuff like that. It's really not that drastic of a change. I guess against lefties last year, we're going from like 22% to 32%, but 32% is still pretty low. So I think it might be a little bit more of an anomaly, short sample size, that Hendricks is giving up these homers. So I'm not going to bank on him sustaining a near 3 against lefties or a near 2 against righties. So I'm going to expect that to regress a little bit and not project him to be a big fly ball home run guy. But he is a guy that will soft toss and will allow you to make contact. So one guy that I do like against contact pitchers is a guy like Jonathan VR leading off for the Mets. He's a guy that does have a nice mix of power and speed. So if he does manage his way on, maybe still a base, and then, he's a duck on a pond for Lindor and Pete Alonso, and those are probably two of the best guys to be on. So I'm not enamored with a stack here, but I definitely think I could isolate a couple guys like VR, Lindor, to project it as a solid spot for him. And then, Hendricks is not immune to the long ball, even if you go back to last year, but it's almost double what he has been. And it's not supported by his underlying advanced metrics. So not that excited, but I could get to the top of the Mets lineup in my distribution.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I think he made a lot of good points there. VR, 6% stolen base rate against right-hand pitching over the last few years as well. I think that's actually the best mark on the slate. So definitely some ways you can get to these guys. Feels to me a little bit more like a mini stack, and I'm with you too on the home run rate, sort of leveling out. 6% this year compared to 3.5% historically, when there's nothing else you could point to and go like, oh, this is much worse now. I just don't think that's something that holds up over the course of time. So take your shots here. I'm going to be completely unknown, it looks like, besides VR, who's going to be at about 5% expected ownership on DraftKings. Next game up, we got St. Louis getting 3.7 implied runs against Charlie Morton. Charlie Morton's numbers starting to look a little bit more like where they have historically, a 3.5x compared to 3.4 since 2019. Strikeout rate still down a little bit, 26.2% compared to 28.7%. And that comes with the swing strike rate taking a drop down as well. Chase rate seems to be the bigger issue for him, dropped from 33% to just under 30% for him now. But Morton in this spot, I feel like the price tag is really hard to avoid. I'd like to see a little more in the way of pitch count. I would also like to see a little bit less ownership. He's come up to 30%, it looks like, on DK today, but he has an 18% chance to be a top pitcher today. And I feel like for me, Gundacker, I could get to 23%, given that that's his chance of being a top value, and that feels fine to me. It's just too low of a price tag, even though the Cardinals don't strike out a ton.
Yeah, 7,200 leaves a lot of margin for error on a medium-sized slate. So I'm probably going to have more Morton than I'm comfortable with, just because of the price point. And some of these stacks that we've already discussed are a little high price, i.e. the Yankees. Maybe we get to Coors, something like that. Looking at my pitch report, when I like to compare a pitcher's pitch type, the performance on a linear scale, the weighted runs created kind of scale. The pitch that we expect Morton to really lean on is going to be that curveball. Obviously, his primary is going to be his fastball, but he'll throw the curveball almost 34% of the time, and it's his most plus pitch. This Cardinals lineup actually doesn't grade out extremely well against curveballs outside of like a Yadi Molina. So it could be a spot to support his secondary pitch, or his second most used pitch, to get him by. His fastball is below average, but at 7,200, I think he could steal enough innings and strikeouts against this lineup to where, much like Stroman, it's not like I'm in love with it, but I think the price makes sense. And I think the median range of outcome is probably 2 to 3x at that price point. So I'll probably take it. Likely not going to get to John Gant though.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And I just to close the loop on Morton too, 6% barrel ball rate allowed this year, 7.5-degree launch angle. So going against a Cardinals team too that doesn't really have a lot of power in the lineup, at least on the year against right-hand pitching, only a 151 ISO, 87 WRC plus, 295 on base percentage. These are pretty bad marks. So overall, I'm with you. I think Morton, honestly, the 32% ownership tag is a little bit of a sticker shock, but I think you made a good case there. Like it may not be crazy just to be with the field and hold hands there, even though top pitcher still does make him look a bit over leveraged. John Gant, I'm also with you on there. I think he is the kind of player that normally I don't want to play at all. That said, he's also the kind of player I don't love stacking against a bunch because I think he's going to give up some production here, particularly to the lefties, a 5.5 or actually 5.8 xFIP since 2019 to lefties compared to a 3 xFIP against righties. Keeps the ball down though. 1.6% on run rate is at this point. I mentioned this on the strategy show this morning. Like that's, averages 3%, 3.1% this year. That's a low number. Now he's been that low for years now, 1.4% on run rate since 2019. This Atlanta stack Gundacker, it's going to be so owned that I think to me, get guys as one-offs, take the lefties in particular, Freeman and Albies. I think you take that shot there. Albies, the price tag really appealing. Those guys are going to be super chalky, but this top stack, right, or the stack rather, is going to be owned like it is the best stack on the slate by a wide margin. And it is a good one, 8% chance of being a top stack, but the top 4 here, all over 20% ownership on DraftKings. That just doesn't seem like the move to me. I think you got your one-offs, mini stack them if you want, but Gant's just not that dude to give up a lot of home run production and really a lot of run production either.
Yeah, our eyes light up whenever a pitcher has like a high xFIP and low strikeout rate. And then if you really put some context to it, a lot of that is because he has such a high walk rate. But that ground ball rate and the low hard contact allowed could definitely take the top off of a potential fantasy ceiling. And we mentioned it, talking about the Mets, the Cardinals bullpen actually hasn't been super friendly in terms of giving up homers themselves. So they could absolutely play spoiler. It might be a stressful 9 innings where there's plenty of traffic and maybe the Braves multi-hit their way or steal enough bases, guys like Acuna with double-edged sword kind of players. But I could easily see a range of outcomes where Gant ground balls his way into another annoying day where people that stack against him don't really get rewarded. And then maybe this bullpen also keeps the ball on the ground. So if the Braves end up being over-owned, we got them at 13%, top 3 right now. Maybe it is worth pushing back on that or going down on that. But it's just, I don't know. It always feels weird to write off a stack when I have no interest in the pitcher. And it's just like my brain can't compute the fact that I don't think the pitcher's that good, but I don't want to stack against them,
But I think that's the human psychology of it. And that's something that to me was like hard initially, was to realize that, as a DFS player, everybody's thinking the exact same thing you're doing, especially when you are a player of like some knowledge. And then you kind of have to do the old George Costanza bit of just doing the reverse of whatever that is. And the reverse in this situation is just to play neither side, because I think the instincts will drive you like, oh, I don't want to play a stack. Maybe I could take a stab at Gant, but he's terrible and doesn't have the best pitch count, doesn't get strikeouts. So I think in this spot, take the one-offs from the Braves. I would be really loath to do a 5-man stack though with the ownership here, because otherwise you're taking on some of the worst bats at the bottom of the order. If you are going to do that though, take one of Riley, one of Swanson, one of Contreras, one of Heredia. Those guys, get them in the mix there, because the rest of the guys are going to be really chalky in a way that's, I think, dangerous on the slate. Next game up, we got the White Sox, 4.2 implied runs against Jose Urquidy. Urquidy is a league average kind of guy in terms of strikeout rate. Less than that, but still just mediocre, 22.3% K rate, 4.5% on run rate makes sense given he's got a 21-degree launch angle that could give up some home run power. Roof going to be closed here though, so that will help him out a little bit. And Urquidy's still only a 1.03 whip on the year, not giving up a ton of hits, the 226 batting average and a under 5% walk rate. So Urquidy's solid, but I feel like Gundacker, the price tag, if the strikeouts aren't going to be there, and they're not an easy matchup either against the White Sox, only a 23.2% K rate. I don't see much utility in Urquidy, but I also don't think the White Sox are going to have a great position here. And they're actually decently owned, at least a few of these guys here, over 10%.
Man, this Urquidy is like an obscene splits guy right now, mowing down lefties and not as pretty against righties. So this White Sox lineup came out with a lot of righties for me to really go after. Abreu, Yermin Mercedes, 4/5. I don't think I'm going to get too invested in the White Sox, but I could see myself checking off some of these guys in the optimizer. If they fall, they fall. But I don't think I'm going to get to either pitcher here. Urquidy, against righties since the beginning of last year probably has somewhere between a, I don't know, 16, 17% overall K rate against that side of the plate, high XFIP. So I don't really get the warm and fuzzies on clicking him. And at 7-9, I'd probably just go for that trouble, go get Charlie Morton. So yeah, probably not going to get to Urquidy here.
Yeah, I think your point about the lefty or the splits, rather the righty splits in particular, the 5.1 xFIP, 280 batting average, 5% home run rate, 5.1% home run rate, and 230 ISO allowed to right-handed hitters since 2019. Those are pretty big numbers. But again, just the whip being that low overall, though, 1.03 on the year makes me think this is a spot to try to target one-off bats again. I feel like I'm beating the drum a little too much of one-off bats besides the Yankees, but I think to me that's the spot where you're going to get your production. I think the full stack being here, Anderson going to be pretty well owned, Adam Engel going to be owned. It looks like Eury Mercedes going to be owned, even though he's one of those guys who doesn't hit that well against right-hand pitching. I think there's a lot of ownership going here, so try to get less of these guys and try to capture that one-off power. Brian Goodwin being down the order, I think sucks because he looked fantastic if he was going to be the two-hole hitter, and you're getting Engel there instead. But I would still take shots at Goodwin, and I don't have any thoughts, Gundacker, about some of these value guys, but you got Vaughn, you got Goodwin, you got Mendick here, and given some of the home run struggles, I feel like maybe you could make a case for these guys, though. Goodwin does qualify for the reverse splits of Urquidy, where he's not going to get the best results, I guess, given what Urquidy's done against lefty bats.
Yeah, I don't hate like a chip in a chair shot on Andrew Vaughn. He's one of those high K rate guys, but he does swing a heavy bat. 12% barrel rate overall. It's just at 2,100 on Fanduel. If I really wanted to pinch a penny, 26 on DK, I don't mind throwing him in the chamber for a chip in a chair bomb. But yeah, the bottom half of this order is kind of hard to be in love with. But I do think Grandal, I guess, betting 6. I guess the bottom, if you believed in Vaughn, Grandal's down there, and you mentioned Goodwin's looking pretty good. Maybe the bottom half of this White Sox lineup is a little more dangerous than the average bottom half of a lineup in the majors right now.
Our producer, Jordan Klein, ever so mature, just slacked us saying reverse splits on Mendick and LMAO. So thanks, Jordan. That's why Tyler won Producer of the Year award for the tip-off. It's that kind of shit. In
my head, I'll probably tell you after the show, but the last minute of analysis, I've had some dangerous sentences. So I didn't want to, yeah. And I don't know if you caught my last show, I said I could sniff Jock Peterson for a homer, and as soon as it left my mouth, I was like, "No, come back!" And of course, he homered that night too, and it's just I had to live
sniff away. Then I guess.
No, I'm scared.
I gotta point out a 1 home run prop here. Jose Abreu plus 350. I think is a pretty good cosign here, and I think if you gun to my head, say, hey, who's gonna hit a home run here? I think the splits with Urquidy giving up the high home run rate. Or Abreu is certainly a guy with a high home run rate of his own, 5% since 2019 against right-hand pitching. I would have him as being a pretty high probability of hitting a homer here, and I feel like he must have popped up on the Gundacker bomb detector for you too.
Yeah, who's that?
Jose Abreu.
Abreu, yeah. So Abreu in my model has a 403. So anything above 4, I tend to open my eyes at. So yeah, Abreu definitely has a decent rating. Andrew Vaughn has a really crazy rating at 426. So might be a sample size thing.
Let's talk about Dylan Cease on the other side. And so this is one that we talked about on the strategy show. And I think out of the risk plays of guys that are high priced, I think I'm going to be more into Brandon Woodruff overall, but Cease still projected for 1% ownership. And he has been good this year, just shy of a 30% K rate, home run rate at 2.1%, maybe due for some regression, given that he's been a 4% guy since 2019, but he is a young pitcher who's kind of evolving to who he is. And you look at swinging strike rates, 15.4%, chase rate, 34%. Both those numbers were up from 12% and 30% since 2019. I feel like he's a new man, and normally, targeting Houston for strikeouts, terrible idea. Usually they are striking out a 19.3% clip against right-hand pitching on the year. Lineup today I have at 21.1%, but that's still well under league average of 24% this year. But I think Cease's stuff might be good enough. It's some risk on Dacker, so I don't think you need to go crazy. But if you gave me 5 to 10% of Dylan Cease today, I don't hate it, even though the projections really, really do not back it out at all.
Yeah, Houston's really tough to pitch against. One of the things we hear it in football a lot, I'm sure you do, strength of schedule. Mm-hmm. If you click on Dylan Cease's name and just kind of look at some of the offenses he's faced, you start wondering, you know what I'm saying, a little grain of salt here, and wondering if we can really lean on. Like, I don't think he's as bad as last year, but I'm also this will be a true test. Like, I want to see how he does against the Astros, some of these upper echelon teams. I feel like the Reds team at home is a tough matchup. So for him to do what he did against the Reds is telling, but I want to see another game that isn't like like even the Yankees offense has been one of the worst offenses all year. So I kind of want to see him bring it against a tough team. So this will definitely be a game I'm keeping my eye on. But for everything that you said, nearly a 30% K rate to both sides of the plate. I don't think there's a zero-sum range of outcomes if that's going to be a K percentage that we expect, but at the same time, it's almost double what he did last year. So I have a lot of reservations, but and it's for sake of getting different, definitely seems like a viable spot if we trust just the numbers.
Yeah, I think it's a spot where I'd be just willing to take on the risk because of the low ownership. And again, not going crazy here. The projection is not great from Awesemo today, just shy of 15 fantasy points. So it's not a mark that you're going to go, crazy over on that respect. But, there aren't a lot of stud pitchers on the slate. And one of the best ones on there is going to be a guy who's in a tough situation at Coors. So to me, 5%, 10%, I think you could talk me into it. Houston bats, I think also a compelling case to be made for as well. They are going to be a little bit worse with guys like Alex Bregman out of the lineup. But you still have a good amount of bats here. And Chas McCormick is the one that I'm continue to be surprised by when I see the numbers. We talked about them this morning, but 1% expected ownership here, 292 ISO on the year with only 60 at bats so far this year against right-hand pitching. So it's not the biggest sample size for him, but he's started to look like a much more lively bat than I think I would expect initially, just based off his name being Chaz. Michael Brantley going to be a little bit more owned as a value play. He's fine. Yordan Alvarez going to be owned. But again, I like Dylan Cease. I like the volatility of the spot, though, because I think the Astros stack is kind of appealing too. And playing both sides in baseball, to me, that's something I'm never afraid of doing, especially when there are merits to both sides. So, Gundacker, tell me about the Astros, and are you willing to stack them up?
So, I mean, the Astros have been one of the more analytically driven teams. I personally was a little surprised to see McCormick batting second. Altuve's been on fire. The reason I was surprised McCormick's batting second, because you risk one less at bat potentially for like a Yordan Alvarez. I just figured, he's a little bit more established. So somebody sees something in McCormick that my sample size doesn't really back up just yet with a 30% K rate. So because of that, he is bare bones min on Fanduel 2K. So right there on the nose between two really strong hitters. Jose Altuve's got a bunch of bombs lately, can be a high on base percentage guy. Same with Brantley. So if he does manage to be productive, he has RBI potential behind Altuve and might get knocked in front of a guy like Brantley. So I guess I'm at least curious in that. And then, like you said, the Astros, right now, the implied run total is knocking on the door of 5, which is generally a number that I tend to look at. The White Sox bullpen, it's kind of hit or miss. The strikeout percentage is not as high as you would think, but everything else is above average. But this Astros team definitely is talented enough to get around some slightly above average pitching. So I think the Astros stack just feels way different because a slew of these names are just, McCormick, Abraham Toro, Miles Straw, Jason Castro, like those names don't really get you giddy. But I think Altuve's been on fire to kind of stay on his lane, and then Brantley and Gurriel and Alvarez are some mainstays. So it's the same but different.
And I think, too, some of the names here that people might not know are actually kind of appealing, like Castro, 240 ISO against right-hand pitching since 2019. And that's actually a decent sample size, 123 WRC plus as well. Obviously, everybody knows Yordan Alvarez, but like McCormick's been good. Toro's the one where I feel like people might not know the name, and they'll just probably be right to not play him. Miles Straw, though, has some speed as well. And Dylan Cease certainly can give up some stolen base at times. So I think there's logic to go into the Houston stack and then trying to play both sides. If they somehow fail and Cease is a monster and is a guy to watch, you'll know firsthand. But don't go crazy on the ownership, though, for the Dylan Cease side. Again, only 1% expected that way. Next game up, we got the Reds, 3.2 implied runs against Joe Musgrove, who's going to be one of the top options on the slate, and he'll be owned like it. He'll have 45% expected ownership on DraftKings. On Fanduel, let me just double check this number here because I don't have it on my sheet right now. He'll be also very highly owned on Fanduel at 37%. Nice price tag on both sites. And he's been a guy who's just been, Brandon Woodruff, I think you could make the case, might be the best overall pitcher on the slate. Musgrove on the year, though, 34% K rate, 2.7 xFIP, 14.5% swing strike rate, and a 38% chase rate. He's getting fantastic results. He's facing a Cincinnati team that doesn't strike out a lot, only 22.2% on the year against right-hand pitching. Musgrove in this spot, I feel like Gundacker, I get the ownership and I want to be there. Does feel like maybe a little bit too much. Top Stack Tool has him being over leveraged by about 14%, but still, he's one of the top options here and well priced, and I think it's hard to move away from.
Yeah, sometimes you just bet on talent. Otherwise, you're stuck with probably I want to say egregious, but you'll be stuck with a lot more Charlie Morton and Marcus Stroman than you might want versus the talent that you are giving up by being low on Musgrove. And I get it, the Reds are scary bats, but the Reds outside of Great American Ballpark are maybe not as menacing as you might think. In Great American Ballpark, I think they're one of the top 4 offenses, if not number 1. On the road, they've been 18th in WRC plus with a 301 team WOBA. So it's slightly below average. So I do think Musgrove at under 9K, we're getting an opportunity that I think is worth taking. Is xFIP against lefties 241, xFIP against righties 303, 30+% K rate at under 9K. I don't really see a strong case to not be there on him, other than just I don't want to say over respect him, but just putting a high level of respect on the team he's facing. And maybe game log watchers are not satisfied with his average range of outcome in terms of fantasy points, but I think the numbers are still there for me to be pretty strong on Musgrove ownership today.
Yeah, I think the one way he doesn't get there is the pitch count for him has never been fantastic, or at least fantastic on an overall basis. 87 pitches per appearance isn't great. And if he does, some of these guys, get a little more walks on him. Like Musgrove's not walking guys at all, 5% rate on the year, but this is a team that gets on base at a 336 clip against right-hand pitching. So that to me is the one little risk that you're taking on. But the tougher hitters too don't walk a lot, like Castellanos and Naquin. So, I mean, obviously there's still some other guys here who can do that. But I think I'm willing to absorb the risk here. I still think, not a guy at that much ownership to go above the field for me. He is over leveraged on the top pitcher stool for a reason, but getting a good amount of your ownership. And, if you want to get to the fields, 45% on DK or even 38% on Fanduel, I think it's not a crazy move at all. Wade Miley on the other side, I feel like is a pitcher who is maybe people were on a little bit more because of the price tag. I know people were asking about him on the strategy show this morning, and he does have the 1 no-hitter to his name and has been better on the year. Always been a guy who does good with run prevention and keeping the ball down, but a 21.9% fly ball rate, 1.2% on run rate, 1.12 whip on the year, and a 3.5 xFIP, might be the most impressive part. He's been great at preventing runs. I don't think he's a play as good as Musgrove. I don't think he's as good of a play as Shohei Ohtani. We'll talk about in a little bit. But I guess I could see the logic in taking a little Miley Gundacker just as the safe play who's not going to kill you, I think. And that's something that could have some value, I guess, more than the 1.1% the field will have him at. So would you play any Wade Miley in this spot?
Probably not. What Miley's a lot like, he's basically got a left-handed John Gant in terms of this slate without maybe the walk problems. I hate playing contact pitchers that if they let a couple up, they can't really erase the mistakes with strikeouts. Even you referenced the no game. I guess he did get to 8 strikeouts but it took him all of 114 pitches to do it. So I don't get the warm and fuzzies there. I would understand it. Like if you hit me in a lineup and I had Miley, I wouldn't push back on it. I just don't. I probably don't do it. I will say the Padres moved Fernando Tatis from 4th to 2nd, which could be, in a home park, that could be worth an extra at bat for a guy like Tatis. That's pretty valuable. He is 6K. The Padres are also, I believe, the most aggressive base running team in the league. So if a guy like Miley, who doesn't necessarily allow a lot of power, does allow some OBP, some guys to get on, there might be, multiple stolen bases there for guys like Pham, Tatis, maybe even Machado. So I actually wouldn't be completely out on the Padres team stack, but I'm with you. Wade Miley is frustrating to stack against. It's kind of like a John Lester. Like everything says he should be getting smoked, and he just never really gives up the big game. So against better judgment, I'll be there on the Padres offense.
Yeah, and a criminally low exit velocity for Miley this year, too. 84 miles per hour exit velocity is actually the best mark on the slate. So he's doing something right for himself, along with a 5.4% barrel ball rate, low launch angle of 5 degrees, too. I think to wait, and I said this on the strategy show this morning. So again, I hate repeating anything I say ever in real life or on shows, but it's got to happen because of this situation. Miley, to me, the way that he works is if you have lineups that work great with Ohtani, you love the stack, you love all that stuff, and then you just go to Wade Miley instead, and that's it. And like you could still play the Ohtani lineup, but maybe the ownership product's too high that way. You go to Miley, you hope somehow he survives. I know Ohtani gets bombed. I don't know the likelihood, but I think that's the logic to play him. Next game up, this is a big one. We got Milwaukee, 5.5 implied runs going against Herman Marquez. And I made the case this morning, Gundacker, and I'm curious where you're going to land with it, that Herman Marquez at the price tag that he's at, I think is worth the shot going against a Milwaukee team that strikes out 26% clip on the year against right-hand pitching. And also Marquez himself, just fantastic at avoiding power for a guy who's pitching half his games at Coors. 1.8% on run rate, 3.7 xFIP. Walking guys too much, but Milwaukee doesn't walk a ton either. Only a 295 on base percentage on the year against right-hand pitching. So to me, Marquez at 5,500. Woodruff is clearly the more appealing Coors option if you're going to go there. Marquez misses bats enough. He knows how to handle Coors, and he's going against a Milwaukee team that disappoints and doesn't have great launch angle guys in the lineup either who are going to take advantage of the weather at Coors in a way that I'm really worried about. So to me, I think Marquez is a dude that you can get to as the value play for me on the slate.
Yeah, this game, I think you look at this game and you really see a wide range of outcomes for pitchers, for hitters, for everything. It's, first of all, it's a 90-degree game in Coors Field, and that in and of itself could create chaos. But you put two pitchers that are probably, you put this game in a more neutral park, we're probably talking about having, two of the higher owned pitchers on the slate. Like, that's how good these pitchers can be. But the park does a lot here. So is that price on Marquez, like, is that a real thing? 5.5K.
He got the discount. Woodruff did not get the discount. Marquez definitely got the discount.
Yeah. So like at that price point, he's cheaper than the aforementioned Fernando Tatis. So if you thought that he could give you even 15 plus, I mean, several times this season he's hitting 20 plus at home. Oakland 24, the Rangers 25, Arizona 30. So it's definitely not. That might be a huge opportunity to see maybe a 5-6x return on a pitcher on the high side. And I don't think it's that crazy of a range of outcome, considering this Brewers lineup has really just Omar Narvaez at a 21% K rate, which is still something, 1-5. The rest of this lineup could be 1-4 or greater in terms of strikeouts. So that opportunity is probably too great for me to not be invested on Herman Marquez. Just really crazy price there. So I'll probably be there, but again, playing all the different ranges of outcomes. But Marquez's weakness is really just, an elevated average, but he doesn't really service a lot of power. This year in Coors Field is 0.36 home run per nine. I mean, that's elite in any park, but in Coors Field, that might be worth, 0.15 somewhere. So I think Marquez is certainly somebody that I'm probably going to have more exposure to than I ever thought I would. And I really didn't just digest the price till now. Woodruff is, like you said, not discounted at 10.2K. Another guy that can get you a 30% K rate, his Sierra, all that stuff. Really, really elite. And the Rockies are another team that aren't menacing. But the Coors Field factor is something to at least respect. This Rockies team does have 3 hitters in this lineup that strike out under 20% against righties. So you could almost make the case that Marquez has a better strikeout matchup as well. I'm going to have more Marquez now than I thought I would. I'm
glad this could lead you to that point here until it absolutely blows up.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna regret it later.
But it's 10% ownership going to Marquez, and that's the thing to me where it's not like the field's going here. It's not like they're going to be the Joe Musgrove numbers, the Shohei Ohtani numbers. You're getting a reasonable ownership number at a guy who's this cheap, who's basically priced cheaper than, as Gundacker mentioned, cheaper than position players who are out there, including ones that he's facing tonight. He's cheaper than Christian Yelich. So in this spot, to me, it's one where I could absorb some of the risk, and the Milwaukee stack too. I think part of what drives me here a little bit, we don't have the confirmed lineup yet. We did get that for the Rockies throughout the course of the show so far, but the Milwaukee lineup here, 5.5 implied runs. But the only guys I'm looking at and I'm thinking really are dangerous hitters are going to be Vogelbach and Yelich. And these guys really, I think are easily worked around, or more easily worked around they have been historically. And they're going to be so highly owned. And normally we don't target the pitcher leverage going against batters, but you are getting that here too. So I think to me, that's the appeal for Marquez. I'm not going to totally say, hey, don't play the Brewers. As I talk about a lot in these shows, even with the Padres, as I was advocating for a fade of them, play 15%. Then don't go wild with it. Just keep it so you're going to get some exposure to different looks in different parts of the stack. But the stack looks overowned according to the top stacks tool. So Gundacker, tell me about the Brewers, because if you could play Marquez and you could play Brewers, there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes people don't get that about MLB. But are you going to the Brewers with the field? And I guess if you are, which are the priority bats?
Yeah. So, I mean, that lineup has Vogelback batting second, Avi Garcia batting fourth. It does kind of hit a cliff after that. I mean, Norvay is still a high average guy, but Jace Peterson, JBJ, and the pitcher spot, rounding out the bottom. And then Daniel Vogelbach, you really only played him for the home run. And we might be able to neutralize that pretty easily with Marquez's numbers against lefties the last 2 years, in terms of home run per nine. So, Urias as the leadoff guy is definitely, he's one of the lowest batting average leadoff guys I've seen in baseball. So it's really the heart of the lineup, the Yelich, Garcia, and even Narvaez to an extent. Yeah, I can get around that. So I really think that the fun question is, yeah, 150, we can do whatever. We can play everything. But if I was running just 20 lineups tonight, would I be more on Marquez or the Brewers stack? And I feel like right now I'm warming up to Marquez. And looking at the Brewers team total, I feel like this is such a donk move or position to be in. But this price is just too much for me to maybe not dream a little big.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. I think it's a good spot to do it, and certainly you're taking on some risks. So keep that in mind. If you're a risk-averse person, you'll play the Marcus Stromans of the world. I have no issue with that. Play Musgrove and Shohei. Take the safe but chalky pitcher options. That's something you could do. Just get different with your stacks. But to me, there's just a lot of logic here to take some Marquez and take a little bit less of the Brewers. You mentioned Brandon Woodruff, but just let's talk through him real fast before we get to the next game, which does include Ohtani. But Brandon Woodruff, 31.5% carried on the year, 0.72 whip, 2.7 exit, really elite numbers. Strikeout rate feels a little bit high for a guy with a 12.5% swing strike rate and a 31% chase rate, but the velocity has been there for him. He's also been really good at avoiding barreled balls, 5% barreled ball rate, 8-degree launch angle. Point being that Brandon Woodruff is the kind of guy who should do well in Coors. I mentioned on the strategy show, like if I were the Rockies and I actually cared about my team, getting guys like Woodruff in at all costs would be, I think, what you do to win. In this spot, like Colorado's not good enough to take advantage of it. So to me, Woodruff 10K at Coors is awful, but he throws a lot of pitches. He's a good pitcher and the team sucks. So to me, I think play Brandon Woodruff more than the field would be my takeaway. But how much are you feeling is the right amount for Woodruff? He's projected for 12% ownership, Gundacker. So are you thinking it's 20 or are you willing to get a lot more crazy than that?
I feel like 20 is a nice round number. If he's going to be at 12 on the field, it gives me 8% leverage. And I also don't feel like I'm dead if he goes out there and gets blasted. And then, yeah, you talk about his pitch mix, throwing almost 63% fastball. All of his secondary pitchers are stuff that uses 15% or less. And, we worry about extra breaking ball pitchers, maybe in Coors with the thin air, acting a little bit different. But just when it comes to secondary slider, curveball, changeup, that's all 13% or less. So it's going to lean a lot on the fastball. And that's kind of what I like to see, somebody that has confidence in their fastball in Coors Field if I'm going to get there. And I think I will. I think 20% is a good number.
Yeah. And that's, you're not going to kill all your lineups. I think that's sort of the thing we talk about here. It's all about managing that ownership as best you can relative to the field and trying to capture these outcomes people just aren't seeing as likely, I guess. Ohtani is going to be up on the next game. Again, 3.5 implied runs against him. But guys, hit that like button if you can. It looks like we got 410 people in here, only 74 likes. I feel like given that it's baseball, we talk all the time. If you hit 30% of your balls, you'd be in the Hall of Fame. So let's get to a 30% rate here. And oh boy, the math is now getting weird. 408. What's 30% of 408? Would be. I'm gonna pull up a calculator, but
don't bring me into your math party. God dang it!
If you get 122.4 likes, right, we'll be at a 30% rate. So
hit that Scott Steiner promo. Hold up.
Yeah, he's fat. For Samoa Joe. But hit the like button, guys. Get us to 122, maybe 123, even if you want to excel and get above 30%. Ohtani, chalk pitcher on the slate today, 45% expected ownership, going against Detroit. I know some people in the premium Slack before the show were talking about, like, why are you going to stack? Why are you going to go against Detroit? They keep blowing up these teams. You go against Detroit because of the longer term sample size and the fact these guys have been bad for enough of a period of time that things should level out. Though I get, if you look at even just the 2020 numbers through now, some of these guys have been playing pretty well. Guys like Robbie Grossman, Jonathan Scope, Heimer Candelario, all these guys over a 111 WRC plus. Even Eric Haas, who's actually been a guy who's been legitimately good. So I won't say even Eric Haas, but Keel Badu, Willie Castro, these guys have been good over the shorter term sample size. But you go back to 2019, and a lot of these guys strike out a lot. And that to me is the thing with Ohtani, who's been a beast, 34% K rate for himself. I don't want to be 45% on Ohtani, but I think that's to me the main difference is that there are other guys at the price point I think you can go to. But I like the stuff, Gundacker, and I feel like that's the main thing. It's a good matchup. Detroit strikes out a 27% clip on the year, and they've been good recently, but I still think they're going to strike out against Show. So I'm willing to be here. I just feel like the field's ownership really pretty lofty. So how are you landing with them?
Yeah, when the field knocks on the door of 50% of anyone on a 6 gamer or 8 gamer, that seems aggressive. Mm-hmm. And it just felt like the range of outcomes in baseball, that's an opportunity at leverage that writes itself. Even though I don't think he's a bad play, 50% is uncomfortable to kind of get to on 8 games. With that said, like the matchup's fine. And I think the 50% is more of a product of the 8K price tag than anything. And I can't argue that it's a really low price tag against the Tigers. And this has been a team that, every now and then one of the people in the chat that have hit the thumbs up button could go out there and throw a gem again. So I'll be there on Ohtani. I'm just going to be really, really cautious on letting that number get too high. And this might be one of those spots, I usually like to have really strong leverage with most of my numbers. So with this opportunity, maybe I either go for half the field or buy into being above the field. I don't think I force myself at matching the field in a rare case, just because baseball is baseball, and on 8 games, I think it's not like we haven't discussed plenty of pitchers to do just fine. So if I'm going to be, over the field on a Woodruff or even a Marquez, it probably eats away at some of my Ohtani ownership, and I'm fine with that. Whatever happens. But I think the matchup and price on Ohtani for DraftKings is just fine. I'd be curious to see where he does land at 11K on Fanduel though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a tough price tag on FanDuel. And it's worth pointing out Ohtani too. Obviously, sometimes people might not know this, but we are doing more MLB content. So if you are playing MLB for the first time, you're not getting his hitting stats. So keep that in mind with the price tag that you're paying for, because sometimes that's obviously a little counterintuitive, but I think an important part. Also worth pointing out, Ohtani's prop for strikeouts today at 7.5. And then actually on FanDuel, looks like it's at 8.5. And a couple of the books have it there too. So something to keep in mind here, that's the line for it. That's a really good mark. That's one you'd see from, a qualified pitcher here. And if he gets around 7, you're probably going to be pretty happy with the effort at his price tag. That said, if you're not going to play Ohtani, and I think you're going to go some of these other ways where, you're taking on chalk elsewhere, going to the Detroit Bats, I think has logic. And if you are a believer in them, I get going there on this slate in particular. Ohtani has been wild on occasion, though the walk rate, the walk rate's really the big issue, but he's still getting his strikeouts amidst it. I don't have a lot of faith in Detroit, Gundacker. I don't know if you feel differently here, but I get the shot because the ownership is so high, and Ohtani just is a volatile pitcher with how he does approach things.
Yeah, it would just pretty much be a leverage thing. Just, if I thought half the field was on this pitcher, then sure, what's 5% of a stack in 150 going to cost me and as throwaways? But I really don't like the leverage against the field. I like the leverage against myself. So if I was a 50% Ohtani guy, there's no way I don't have some Tiger stack just in case all hell broke loose.
Yeah, no, I think that's the smart way to approach it, and definitely a helpful strategy for baseball for people who are used to some of the more binary sports out there. It's an event-based sport in baseball, and you got to try to capture the outcomes when there is a chance to get positive swings on either side of the outcome. Matt Manning is the pitcher on the other side. He's been a 25% strikeout rate guy in the minors historically. I actually had the numbers this morning in front of me. I don't have them now, but basically a guy who's kind of mediocre, I think, is the way that it's looking. I think our pal Eric Lindquist will be up next on Live Before Lock with Greg Ehrenberg, and mentioned that he's had an 8 ERA, I believe, in the minors this year. So everything more towards a bad pitcher than a good one, Gundacker. And it seems like the spot for the Angels, tough stack to really get to because of Ohtani being in the mix. You're not going to be able to get that production from him. And you do want your stacks to correlate like that, because more at bats for Ohtani, more success for Ohtani is going to have these guys get more chances to be successful on their own. But I think taking one-offs here is probably the move because of Ohtani being in the 2 hole and not having, that chance to get points from him. Like I would take Jared Walsh as a one-off and maybe Taylor Ward too. And I guess you could talk me into Upton with him kind of looking a little more lively recently. But to me, just get some of these guys against Manning, because Manning's probably not good.
Yeah. So when I first started, he was going to be up against Ohtani a couple days ago. I started digging around him, and he's their number 3 prospect. And when you hear number 3 prospect, your eyes light up. And then you remember it's the Detroit Tigers. Wait a minute. This Manning hasn't been great in AAA so far this season. He's got about 32 innings of sample size and has allowed 6 bombs in 16 innings against lefties and 5 bombs in 16 innings against righties. So you're looking for 1 bomb per 9 innings, and he's well above that. So I don't know, math. We go back to math, but that might be a 3 or 4 home run per 9. This is a good spot for the Angels. I really, really wish that these sites would allow us on the Ohtani pitcher days to split Ohtani to pitcher Ohtani, hitter Ohtani, because this would be an amazing spot. Looks like on paper for hitter Ohtani, and I think this wouldn't be a crazy spot to see a home run from Ohtani and then like a strong pitcher game to reignite his MVP Twitter debates. We seem to get him versus Vladdy once a night. So yeah, there's nothing in Manning's like underlying stats from the minors this season that really makes me want to get behind him. His whip is ridiculous, 1.7 to lefties, 1.38 to righties. So I'm not playing him. It looks like a guy I want to go out of my way to pick on. I just wish Ohtani was there to open that up, but I can easily justify Jared Walsh. I think a lot of people might be hesitant to put 5K on Jared Walsh, but I mean, this is a pristine matchup for him. If Upton's in that leadoff spot, he has a serviceable matchup. Their lineup is always late, so I'm not expecting any surprises, but without Rendon, without Trout, and without the opportunity to play Ohtani's bat, it's hard to love Angel stacks on paper, but it's a good matchup.
Yeah, and the Walsh bat, I agree with you, is one that jumps out. 155 WRC plus for him against right-hand pitching since 2019, 296 ISO. He's definitely been a guy who's gotten good results a number of times here. And yeah, I would point out Taylor Ward too, 2,900. I think a guy who could benefit if a guy like Walsh maybe gets on base but doesn't have the power or doesn't have the home run. Maybe Ward can get him in. I think it's the hope I'd have. Last game on the slate, and again, you have Live Before Lock coming up after this show for MLB. You're going to have Greg Ehrenberg and Eric Lindquist talking about everything on the slate from their perspective. So stay tuned for those guys. And of course, hit that like button if you can. We appreciate it a bunch. Tampa Bay, 4.8 implied runs against Justin Dunn. And Justin Dunn, to me, I think to save some time here, similar to the Gant situation that we talked about earlier, where Dunn to me is like not a great hitter, or not a great pitcher rather, and it certainly should give up good hitting production, a 20-degree launch angle, 9% barrel ball rate. But he's been good enough this year with the 202 batting average allowed, and he's really walking guys more in a way that's problematic, 14% walk rate. That's the thing that I'm expecting to affect him and get to that 5.6 xFIP he's had on the year, where I just don't think this team is going to be full stacked out the wazoo. God, I hate that I just said that phrase, but they're going to be full stacked very heavily today. Lots of ownership to these guys, 16% aggregate ownership for the stack, but you have guys, Brandon Lau over 22%, Rosarena, G-Man Choi, Joey Wendell, Walls, all these guys are going to be around 15% ownership. I just don't need to be there. I think it's a big enough slate, and we talked about some other stacks that appeal to me. So to me, Gundacker, I think this is a one-off spot against Dunn, and also I would not play Justin Dunn very much on the slate either.
Yeah, so his home run per 9 isn't there yet this season, but just like how we looked at, some of the other pitchers, and there's not much change from this year to last year in terms of their batted ball event percentages. So for instance, the last year in 45 innings, Justin Dunn against lefties had a 2.31 home run per 9. That's come down a little bit, but I think the significant numbers, the 1.61 to righties, like his hard contact kind of has dropped 13%, but the fly ball rate is still really, really high. So like, I don't think he's going to be a 0.38 home run per 9 guy against righties, but this Rays lineup only has 2 righties anyway, so we can really dial in on these lefty splits and maybe seek out power. And the Rays often, 50% of their games get hidden in Tropicana. You put them in a little bit more neutral to plus park, and T-Mobile Park has been 6 points above average in terms of homers allowed. Like maybe this is a spot for the Rays power bats to wake up for whoever those are. But the Rays are also with Cash at the helm. This is a team that definitely runs the risk of the platoon swaps mid-game. Like they'll sub in guys, and guys like G-Man Choi, Brandon Lau, like you're not guaranteed to get 9 innings of them. So I can make the case for the lefties. I think Austin Meadows would probably be like the guy that I seek out the most. He has the highest bomb rating of all of my Rays in the lineup. But yeah, there's enough pushback to where maybe they're going to be over owned, but I do think it's a solid power spot, especially for a Rays lineup that looks like they did their homework. Like this doesn't look like it's an accident that they have this many lefties lined up against Dunn.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And Dunn historically giving up a 232 ISO to lefties. Also gives up a lot of steals. So I'm not sure it would benefit that much. I guess Rosarena's had a pretty high steal rate, and Kiermaier and Phillips as well. Of some guys who can get there. But yeah, I think I'm still more inclined to try to chase the shorter stacks or the one-offs because the 5-man is going to be owned very appropriately. But I would agree here. 7.2 xFIP since 2019 for Dunn against lefties. Not a very good mark at all. Real fast, Rich Hill, I think, is worth some exposure. He's going to be 9% owned today. He's been very good on the year in some spots, but overall, just basically flat with where he's been historically, a 26% K rate. Different set he's faced in Seattle. He strikes out at a 27% clip, actually 27.4% clip against left-hand pitching on the year. So Rich Hill, I think, can get there, and I think to me is worth getting some shares of Gundacker. But give me your final thoughts here, Rich Hill or the Seattle stack, if you have any interest in either side.
Probably Rich Hill. This Mariners lineup has an incredibly high K percentage against lefties. Just JP Crawford has a sub 20%, and there's a lot of guys here knocking on the door of 30%. There's a big lane from Haniger, Fraley, Tom Murphy, Dylan Moore, Jake Bowers that on average, you put all those guys in a basket, that's a 30% K rate. So Hill has a really, really solid spot. 9,200. Feel like I'm overpaying for the average range of outcome, but a little late night hammer, a little Mariners baseball to make you feel better. I will say Tom Murphy, somebody to be scared of. He's the one Mariners bat that projects well for power, and he's actually one of the higher bomb detector guys just because of his history against lefties. But outside of that, I think this is a really strong matchup on paper for Rich Hill.
All right, so make sure to go follow at Gundacker, follow at Chris Spags, follow at Awesemo_com. Make sure to tune in live before lock coming up next. And Gundacker, actually, let me give you the floor real fast to plug whatever you want here because you did a great job this show. I know that I mentioned the data sheets that you tweeted out earlier. Basically looking at the exact same things I'm looking at, and things that are helpful for you guys out there if you're trying to understand baseball. I think that's a big part of it. But give the people your final plug.
Yeah, just twitter.com/Gundacker. I wrote a new spreadsheet that I'm trying to iron out, glitches and bugs and anything like that. So I put it up on Twitter for free if anybody wants a little peek at it. And just all I ask is if you see something that's wrong, let me know. I'm not going to be insulted. I just want to fix it. So it's up there.
Yeah, so go check that out. Follow at Gundacker, follow at Chris Spags. Stay tuned. Greg Ehrenberg and Eric Lindquist coming up right after this. So see you guys again soon. Enjoy your days. Good luck.
It is the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock show. I'm here, Greg Ehrenberg, joined by Eric Lindquist. And how do we know that it is MLB Live Before Lock? Because producer Jordan Klein told us. So really thrown off by doing baseball shows instead of basketball now. He's no clue what's going on. He's like, what sport are we talking about? What show is this? What do we do? It's baseball, Jordan. It's like basketball, but we talk about baseball. Eric, are you as confused as Jordan is?
I mean, I might be confused. This is my first MLB Live Before Lock where we're actually going right before a lock, and yeah, that's good times. Fun to be doing it. Jordan, whatever. You're not producer of the year. Just get over it. I know that you're sad about it. From the tip off yesterday, oh, he's not happy about that. It's fine. But one Tyler Xander just does such an immaculate job, and he rotates between the two shots. He has our zoom ins. It's on cue. He hits all his cues. What can you say? Number 2 producer, still an okay thing to be.
Tyler is a last name.
What? Tyler? Yeah. It's not producer Tyler. I know Tyler, producer. Yes. It's actually, yeah, it's weird.
News to me. He's just Tyler to me in Slack. So I didn't know he had a last name. Producer, he just kind of started doing it. That's who he is. He's Tyler to me. And listen, Jordan, it's no big deal. If you are the second best producer in the universe, you're still going to find work. It's, number 1 in the entire world, like Brad Pitt. Good looking guy, not the best looking guy in the universe. There's nothing wrong with being Brad Pitt, right? You're still a good producer. You're just not the best in the universe, but it's okay, right? Things go on. Today's show, by the way, is sponsored by Jock Market. And guys, if you're not familiar with Jock Market, just a different way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of building lineups, any kind of salary constraints, you're placing IPO bids and you're kind of playing it like a stock market for individual players. So it's definitely a different way to play DFS. You can download the app to check it out. There are free contests you could check out, but if you do want to make a deposit and play with some real money, use the promo code Awesemo and you'll get a $50 bonus on your first deposit. That is promo code Awesemo. So Eric, first time doing Live Before Lock, maybe you're a little, trepidatious jumping into the waters here, but what are your overarching thoughts on the slate here? Is there anything that really stands out you want to talk about on today's 8-game slate? No real weather concerns to worry about.
Yeah, so I got to do the strategy show with Chris Baggs this morning, which is an absolute blast. I write the MLB Slate Starter article, which comes out every night. So I'm writing an article without any idea of what ownership's going to be. It allows me to kind of look at it from a blank canvas perspective about where I think the field might go, where they might not go. It was interesting waking up this morning to 65% Shohei Ohtani existing. I knew right off the bat he was going to be the highest owned pitcher over on Draftkings. That was really no surprise at that price tag. What I do see is that now he's down below 50%. I think I'm going to have a little bit more of him than I was going to say I was going to have this morning. I was going to be at about half of 60% for whatever that would be. I think I'm still going to be below the field, though. And I think that there are so many good spots for pitcher to get some leverage. And I'm never really like going out of my way to leverage myself with pitching, but 5,500 for a guy like German Marquez is going to be a big stand. Brandon Woodruff, I like both of the pitchers in Coors Field today. And it makes me feel like a little bit of like I'm asking for pain and suffering today, but I'm okay with it because I think that like the price tag leads you to German Marquez, a great ground ball pitcher in Coors Field. I think that there's more Ks that exist in that lineup and neutralized a little bit of his issues with walks, just seeing what the Milwaukee Brewers lineup is capable of in K'ing. And then on the other side, Brandon Woodruff, I think is just underowned, considering he's number 2 or number 3 in every single book across the industry in National League Cy Young, has elite stuff. I think that transcends the ballpark. And then you also have just a ridiculously poor WRC plus for this Colorado Rockies lineup. I'm making a big stand with both these pitchers in Coors Field, and that's going to kind of make or break my slate.
So I think you said something kind of interesting there, that you do write a baseball article, which people aren't aware. Check out Eric's baseball articles. I'm sure he retweets them. You can find them at awesemo.com, and you click on the MLB subheader. But so you said that Shohei Ohtani ended up coming down in ownership. So you view him a little bit differently than you did this morning. Is there any other plays like that, or for whatever reason, either change in ownership, maybe a change in your perspective, and just starting with pitchers for right now, are there any pitchers who you have really changed your opinion on from the time you wrote that article?
I would say, I like Brandon Woodruff more, seeing that he's under 5%. I see it, the top 2 pitcher percentage for him there. I get all the data. I get all the goods to be able to see what the ownership is going to be at and the top 2 pitcher percentage. I don't have that the night before writing an article, but I already know that I love Brandon Woodruff's stuff. And It's not 100 degrees like we've seen the last couple of days for San Diego. That doesn't really affect it too much. It's not like Milwaukee was playing there earlier. This is their first game of their set. But I think Brandon Woodruff is just a guy, you're rarely ever going to get this kind of leverage going to him. I also think because there isn't an offense that really, other than the Padres or Atlanta, that you really have to be paying up a crazy amount for on this slate, why not go up to 10-2 for the best pure arm talent on this slate?
Yeah, I agree with you. He's the best pitcher. One thing that's a little bit of a concern for me is that we have seen a pretty dramatic decrease in his spin rate in his last couple of starts with some of the rule changes to baseball. I don't really know exactly how to approach this right now. I know that I've been significantly lower on Garrett Cole in his last couple of starts in the field for this reason. I still think just given the data we have on this slate, Brandon Woodruff is somebody I want to be overweight to. But, I've talked about this with Spags a lot. I've talked about this with Pete McCarthy a little bit. And maybe the audience and people in general are a little sick of hearing about spin rates for pitchers at this point. But is any of this stuff impacting how you view Woodruff or any other pitchers on a whole right now?
Say that one more time. I got caught up trying to get something to pop up.
So the changes in spin rate with baseball cracking down on substance rules. Brandon Woodruff is one of the guys who appears like he's going to be the most impacted in terms of a dip in spin rate. Has that impacted how you view him at all? And maybe not just for this particular slate, because I agree that he's going very under-owned, but does it impact you how you view him at all, or maybe any other pitchers on today's slate or just the league as a whole?
So this is where you have to be very, very careful about how you're looking at this from a daily fantasy perspective and how you're looking at this from a long-term perspective. I need to be just worried about today. He's under 5%. The arm talent tells me that it's there. We're going to gain a sample size over the next 2-3 weeks on a lot of these pitchers. We're going to be able to look at it and say, yes, this is pretty clear cut that this is who they're going to be long-term. That drop from 2,500 to 2,200 is just such a significant drop for some of these guys in terms of fastball spin rate, and seeing it with their other pitchers. It's not going to make their pitches look as different. But there's going to be guys who can still pitch through it. There's going to be guys who can't. I'm not sure how to quantify that yet, other than just seeing what they're saying about it. Obviously, Tyler Glasnow talking about his injury was a very telling thing. Garrett Cole being very honest about the fact that he's used stuff. Same with Trevor Bauer. There's certain guys that we know use it and they want to keep using it for a protection or for whatever the reason might be. I just know that I can't necessarily quantify that until I have more data on it. So why not take the ownership discount on a guy just in the hopes that it's still there from a daily fantasy perspective, maybe in the prop market or being shorter on some of these strikeouts going forward is probably a nice way to also go about it. I think you're probably making a killing if you're shorting guys. I know we talked yesterday about shorting a bunch of guys, and Kershaw and Wheeler and everybody else was all lower. Like everybody was coming in underneath their projection. And that's what we're going to see for a lot of these guys going forward, but I can't tell you how to quantify that yet.
Yeah, so to me, the way that I'm approaching it is it's really going to be ownership based. So somebody like Garrett Cole, the last couple of times he starts, although not yesterday because deGrom was on the slate, but 2 starts ago, we had Garrett Cole project for 55% ownership. And I see something like that, and when I have concerns about how he might look as a pitcher going forward, and by the way, yesterday, lowest spin rate that he's had in any start in the last 3 years, uses changeup more than any other start in the history of his career. And then also he only struck out 4 hitters, which tied for the lowest of his career, and then complained to the media after the game they did trouble gripping the ball. So there's all kinds of red flags there. And then, I mean, what does that mean for Garrett Cole? He's clearly going to be worse, I think, going forward, but how much worse? He's the odds-on favorite to win the American League Cy Young. Is he still going to win Cy Young? Is he still going to be an ace? Is he just going to be, a guy who's one of the best pitchers in baseball, but not the best pitcher in the American League anymore? So, there's a lot of variability there, but the point I'm making here is with Garrett Cole on a slate where he's like 55% owned, then I see a reason as, hey, there's a lot of variance here. I want to be underweight. When I look at somebody like Brandon Woodruff today, he's only projected for 1% ownership on Fanduel. On Draftkings, he's only projected for 4.5% ownership. So with that in mind, I want to embrace the variance of being overweight to the field on him. There's a lot of uncertainty, but I want to embrace it and want to be overweight when somebody's really that low owned. So I agree relative to ownership, Brandon Woodruff is my favorite pitcher on the slate. It seems like you're on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely same page. And I still think this is very different, I think, than what I normally do. I think this is why I like this 8-gamer so much today, is that you have some pitching leverage that can be gained by going other directions. And I don't think it's crazy. If on a 13 or a 14 game slate, I think I would probably be going heavier to a guy like Musgrove or Ohtani, because that ownership would come down naturally. You get more options that exist on the slate. But because they're sitting in the 40s here, it's not just that I like Brandon Woodruff as a pitcher, as somebody who I can think can go out and win, but I think I can get a massive amount of leverage over some of these people that are just heavier on Ohtani and Musgrove. And I'm just about there on Musgrove, so I won't talk to that, but a little bit lower on Ohtani. Do like the Detroit side just in terms of a stack in the event that these walks just pop up randomly for him. Also a guy who doesn't avoid a bunch of bats, and there's enough power up and down in Detroit. Not that I'm going crazy by any means, but having a couple shares there is not the worst way to go. But it's very rare that you get a slate like this where I do like so many other options, like whether it's a Rich Hill or a Dylan Cease, who has a watered down Houston lineup. I think that it's going to be rare going forward that I'm going to be recommending to get off of the chalk this much at pitching, but I just think there's such a good case for it today.
All right. And then one more thing, and then we could close the door on Brandon Woodruff, move on to some other pitchers. His K prop today, over under 6.5 and plus 120 is available for over 6.5. I like the over number on that, especially considering how bad this Rockies offense is. So whenever you put a pitcher in Coors Field, there is potential to give up a lot of runs. But in terms of strikeouts, this is still an offense that strikes out a lot against right-handed pitching. It's not particularly good. Plus 120 on over 6.5 for Woodruff. Would you agree that looks like a pretty strong bet?
Yeah, I think it looks really strong. And as I said, Colorado, the worst WRC plus against right-handed pitching, 68. I know that adjusts for ballpark, but at the same time, this is bad Colorado Rockies offense. And I really do understand if you feel trepidation about Coors Field, if you feel trepidation about him coming in there. It is a little bit warmer than I think I thought it was going to be. It was like 84, 85. It's right now 90 degrees in Colorado, and it looks like it's going to be that way at first pitch, wind blowing out. So obviously it's a good hitting environment, but I think Brandon Woodruff can beat any kind of matchup that he's in. And if you're going to give me that kind of cheap ownership on it, and also for the K prop 6.5, that is so much lower. If this game was going on in Milwaukee, I mean, you'd be looking at 8.5 or more possibly on that number. And I really like taking the over there as well.
Yeah, so I know you talked about Ohtani briefly as a DraftKings play, but to me, there's a much different outlook on Fanduel, and I think that we should talk about this. And we've talked about Musgrove, Ohtani, Woodruff. Those are kind of the core guys we talked about so far on DraftKings. All three of us like them. On Fanduel, Shohei Ohtani's priced all the way up to 11,000. So he's a lot more expensive. Obviously, on a points per dollar sense, it doesn't make him as strong of a play. But that also means he's only project for 8% ownership. All the field is going to roster Joe Musgrove. Musgrove project for nearly 40% ownership on Fanduel at 8,500. Cash games, I certainly think play Musgrove. GPPs, though, Shohei Ohtani, are you afraid of the 11,000 price tag? They are very cautious with him generally. Are you still willing to roster him on Fanduel at an 11,000 price tag?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm getting him under 10%. I've got right around 30% on Fanduel, and I've got about just around that number on DK as well. I play baseball very differently than I play a sport like NBA. I mean, I am happy to embrace variance. I am happy to get off of chalk. I'm happy because you're looking at a single game sample size, and Joe Musgrove is in a great spot, but Cincinnati doesn't K completely at a ridiculous rate against righties in the way that people are looking at. Like it's not as good of a spot as what everybody's pinning it down to be for a pitcher. Joe Musgrove has just been that good this season. I think that's really why we're seeing the ownership where it is. I mean, the arm talent is just off the charts with him. We've seen that in Pittsburgh. We've seen that here now in San Diego as well. I absolutely love him as a pitcher. 88 exit velocity, 37.3% hard hit percentage, 33.8% K rate on the season, and under 5% for a walk rate. Like there's nothing that I can possibly say that I don't like Joe Musgrove, but at the same time, we just have an opportunity here with a guy like Ohtani at 11K to just get different with a guy who has an outrageous amount of K upside here. Detroit that K's at 27% against righties, the highest rate in Major League Baseball. They're the highest against both-handedness, but I digress. I absolutely think that there are Ks to be had in this lineup. It's just that I think that there's downside at the ownership that he has on DraftKings. There's no downside at 8%, so long as I'm not playing like the chalky, cheap stack to play alongside them on FanDuel. I think that you really just have to be cognizant of what the other team that you're running on the other side of it. You're not going to be able to afford Padre bats or something like that are still priced like they're in Coors Field, but you do have options on FanDuel at under 8%. You can play just about anybody else outside of Coors Field, and you're not going to be duped. Like it's going to be very easy to get a lot of leverage on the field just about everywhere there.
And then one other point to make about Joe Musgrove and his FanDuel ownership. We currently haven't projected this before, 36% ownership, but only a 12% chance of being the top pitcher on the slate. So he does have the best odds of being the top pitcher. He is the best points per dollar play, which is why I think cash games, you would want to play Joe Musgrove on FanDuel. You want to play him in cash games on DraftKings too, I think. However, it's just the 12% versus 36% that makes him the most negatively leveraged pitcher on the entire slate. Whereas we look at guys like Shohei Ohtani, slightly positively leveraged, or Brandon Woodruff, 1.4% projected ownership on FanDuel, 11.5% chance of being the top pitcher. So to me, GPPs on both sites. I really like Brandon Woodruff. He's somebody that I'm going to be pretty massively overweight to the field on. So we've talked about some pitchers we like. Is there anybody who's picking up a bunch of ownership that you don't like as a pitching play today, Eric? It could be on FanDuel or DraftKings.
Okay, so I would say Joe Musgrove, I don't want to be 34%. I think that that's just a flat out mistake in tournaments on FanDuel because there are just look how flat it is in terms of what the top pitcher percentage is on that on a single pitcher site. A guy like Shohei Ohtani is about flat as well. Marcus Stroman, flat. Charlie Morton, it's a little bit wonky, but part of that is you're getting 8,200. If people are going to the Coors aspect or paying up for Padres or doing different things like that, if you want to go to the expensive Toronto lineup, which we still don't have, do we? That game is starting very, very soon. That makes me question whether or not Vlad's going to be a part of it or not at this point in time. I think Gundacker was talking about that a little on the earlier show, but I would say the one guy on FanDuel specifically, I think Charlie Morton probably going a little bit overowned. I think you can get away from 15% of him. I wouldn't mind if you did. He's 8,200. It's not like that's going to kill you. Gives you some leverage off of Joe Musgrove as is, even if he's going a little bit overowned compared to his chance of being the top pitcher. Over on DraftKings, I would say the one guy that I probably don't want to be getting to now is Marcus Stroman at 23.5 for his ownership. That just seems a little bit high for a guy who doesn't carry a ton of K upside. I know the Cubs strike out at the 7th highest rate in baseball. It's a good matchup by all means, and I don't mind getting to a little bit of that there. But we got Chris Bryant in the lineup. I was kind of hoping that he was going to be out this morning if I was going to be targeting more Stroman. That didn't end up happening or coming to fruition. So that's one more dangerous bat that exists. And then there's just other places that I think there's enough other upside. And then also guys at cheaper price tags, like a guy like German Marquez at 5,500 that I would much rather roster where I'm getting leverage rather than going to somebody who's just bleh for me, like Marcus Stroman.
Yeah, so I think Stroman's a really solid real life pitcher. I rarely ever play him in fantasy, especially when he has this kind of ownership going to him. By the way, if you refresh, we actually have new ownership projections, and he's only gone up. So we currently have Marcus Stroman, who, by the way, 9,900 for Marcus Stroman on FanDuel, project for 10% ownership. On DraftKings, Marcus Stroman at 8,600 project for 24.6% ownership. And if you look at his numbers for the year, he's overperformed his peripheral stats by a good margin: 2.32 ERA, 4.17 expected ERA, 3.55 FIP. Overall, though, those aren't really problematic numbers. The issue here is just the K rate, 21.5% strikeout rate this year. It's the highest of his career, and it's still really low. So we're looking at a guy who, on his best days is probably striking out 7 or 8 hitters. And given where his price is, also where the ownership is, I view him typically as more of a floor play than a ceiling play. And there's much safer pitching options on this slate. And there's also guys with higher ceilings. Then also he's really expensive. So to me, he's the easiest guy to avoid in my current build. Let's see, did I get to him at all? I have him in 8% of lineups right now. And if anything, I'd be more apt to lower that number. And I'm going to have to change my lineups at some point whenever we get this Toronto Blue Jays lineup that comes out, which hopefully comes soon. The game starts in 40 minutes, and I'm gonna have
a ton of them now. I was already going to be over the field, and now I'm going to probably be even further over the field at this point in time. I love when lineups come out late, but it does kind of stress me out because it makes me think that the best hitter that I want the most of might not be in it.
Yeah, I would think that Vlad is not going to play today, but obviously still remains to be seen. But I mean, they can't wait that much longer to get the lineup out because the game starts soon.
45 minutes.
Yeah, the game starts soon. They have to know who's playing before the game starts. This is listen. You've never done MLB Live before, Locke. We just gave you an NBA-esque slate where we don't know whether one of the most important players on the slate, and Vlad Jr., who's the current betting favorite to win the American League MVP, is going to be playing or not today. So hopefully,
seems like an important guy
soon.
To know. Seems important. Just saying.
Since they're both on the slate, just quick, are you opinionated on who you think should win the MVP between Ohtani and Vlad as of now?
You're asking the wrong guy because I'm so biased towards Shohei Ohtani, not just because I love him, but because my fiance can watch baseball all night, every night. We watch a lot of Angels games simply because she absolutely loves Shohei Ohtani, thinks he's not just adorable and amazing at baseball and all of those things, but it gives us a reason to have something to kind of bond over. And I mean, as soon as he got into the league, he was throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs and hitting 425 bombs. Like, it's hard not to enjoy a guy who can do both sides of it. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know if that's like a shock factor, and then maybe I'm a little bit biased just because it's like he does both so well, and he does them at an elite level. But Vlad Guerrero is also just incredible. I would actually just say I don't really care between the two because they both are worthy of it.
Yeah, well, way to be a French rider. For me, it's Vlad Jr. Number one, I'm also biased because I've put a lot of money on him to an MVP throughout the season. But the other thing also, arguably Vlad is having the best season we've seen from a hitter since Barry Bonds. WRC plus over 200 at this point, already worth about 4.5 wins above replacement. So, in terms of a value perspective, Vlad is pretty far ahead of Ohtani. The difference with Ohtani is, a little bit of a novelty factor, hitting and pitching. Also, I think Ohtani is probably a little bit more likely to regress than Vlad is going forward, but that isn't how I phrased the question anyway. But moving onward, any other pitchers that you would like to talk about? Actually, I would never mind. Rescind that. I'm going to ask you about a pitcher you already brought up because I'm curious your thoughts on him. Now, you had mentioned you like German Marquez. Explain to me and tell me why you like Marquez for this slate.
He's 5,500 and it gives me a completely different build. And now the ownership's starting to crawl up here as the days progressed. This morning, he was at like 2% and that changed. And I knew that was going to change. I didn't know it was going to change to be about like no leverage on him. I still am going to be over top of the field on what is he rated now at about 11%, 12%. I still think 5,500 just gives me kind of a different build that I'm going towards. I do understand now for me, like Brandon Woodruff needs to be the priority of the two Coors Fields pitchers just because of the ownership. I can't believe, again, Woodruff's come up a little bit. He's just gone up another 2% in our last run of ownership. He's sitting at 6.8. So I still am going to be well over the field on that one. But 5,500, I was planning now on going to a lot of the Toronto bats, and he's kind of my main way of doing that. And I think that I'm just going to have to stick with that here since I'm on a show. How about that?
I'm fine with that. So German Marquez, I'm right about even with the field on him right now. And then you said we got another run of ownership.
Yeah. It just changed a little bit. We just had Woodruff go up 2%. We had a couple of guys that just changed fractionally. Nothing that really jumps off the page by any means. I guess the one guy I do want to ask you about is Dylan Cease, just because I was originally planning on going way over the field on that as well. A guy, I knew he would not be popular whatsoever. This Houston team does not strike out, but you take out Bregman, you put in Toro. That's a pretty nice little upgrade. I also was kind of waiting to see who ended up at catcher there. Jason Castro's there instead of Martin Maldonado, which is definitely a downgrade in terms of Ks in that 9-hole. Probably only a guy he's going to face twice, so that doesn't matter as much to me as what I was thinking. But I just think that he's a very live arm. Roof is closed there right now. I think it's going to stay closed, so I think that that's a good thing for him here. And then Chas McCormick, who hit double dong yesterday, ended up getting moved up to the 2-hole, has one of the higher K rates on this team. So I think that may not be a good thing in terms of real life baseball, but having him in the 2-hole, he Ks at the highest percentage on this entire team, 29.8. I think that there is still an ability for an upside there with Alvarez, Castro, McCormick, all above 25%. For a couple of Ks more than people are projecting him for. And if he just does his normal stuff he's been doing here this season, you have Bregman not out there. That's definitely one less lethal bat to worry about.
Yeah, so Dylan Cease, I am overweight to the field on him, but it's not a hard thing to get overweight to the field on Dylan Cease. We currently have him projected for 1% ownership. So I have Cease in about 5% of my lineups right now. So I'm 5x the field on Dylan Cease, but I don't love the matchup against Houston. He is on the road. Also, Dylan Cease, he's pitched considerably better this year than his last couple of years in baseball. And he did enter the league as one of the top pitching prospects in all of baseball. But my biggest concern here is just how deep he's going to be allowed to work into the games because he's a guy, he's walked a lot of hitters and struck out a lot of hitters this year, 29.7% strikeout rate, 10.1% walk rate. So there's been a lot of outings where he hasn't worked deep into games, and that's something that could cap his upside a little bit. Also, his price all the way up to 9,500 and the difficulty of the matchup. So he's in my player pool. I'm overweight to the field, but I'm not going crazy with exposure to him. The guy that I'm really taking a stand on a pitcher, and same as you, is Brandon Woodruff.
Okay, well, then that's good. I mean, I think we're kind of on the same wavelength for pitching outside of maybe I'm just a little bit higher on Marquez, just fractionally, not crazy. I'm just a little bit over 20%, but I was originally planning on being way, way, way over at the number that he was at and just going completely different with these builds. Also, now if I'm not going to have Vlad Guerrero to pay up for to get different, who I was going to be massively overweight to the field to, and we're still waiting on it. I have less of a need to go to Marquez.
And then I'm going to ask you one thing, because I assume the answer to this is going to be no, but German Marquez 9,000 on Fanduel, which, by the way, also maybe that's even more reason to like him on DraftKings, because at least the Fanduel pricing algorithm seems to be looking at him and thinking of him as a good pitching option today. But any interest in you for him at 9,000 on Fanduel, where he's projected for less than 1% ownership?
No.
Okay, fair enough. That definitely takes there's a big difference between 9,000 and 5,500. So definitely bears talking about. Then something else about this slate is, there are a bunch of relief type pitchers that are starting, like John Gant doesn't work very deep into games. Then we have Michael King starting for the Yankees, TJ Zike starting for the Blue Jays, Matt Manning likely not going to be starting, working super deep into the game starting for Detroit. So already only an 8-game slate, and there's a lot of guys that just kind of by default get taken out of the player pool. But is there anybody else who you're getting a decent amount of exposure to tonight?
I was getting some decent exposure to Houston, even on the other side of C. So we're talking about him, and I'm overweight to the field, and I definitely like him there as well. But McCormick seems like a pretty live bat when he's making contact.
I meant pitchers.
Oh, pitchers. My fault.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were shifting across.
No, not yet. I want
to
wrap a bow on the pitchers.
Oh, yeah. Let's put a bow on this thing. That's great. So, no, I think we've kind of talked about everything. The only guy that I'm probably not getting to a ton of, just because I don't know what the K upside is there, and I also don't like lefties against his team, but Wade Miley, you could get some leverage if you wanted to go there. I'm already doing it with Dylan Cease. I'm already doing it with a couple of these other guys that specifically Brandon Woodruff, who I'm just, way over the field on. I feel like I don't have a need to go to an 8,000 Wade Miley when I already feel pretty confident that somebody else in that range is going to outperform.
All right. So somebody in chat is saying that we have the Blue Jays lineup, which we do. News God just posted, and Vlad is in the lineup. So there's Marcus Semien, Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr., and then Grichuk, Biggio, Gurriel, Tellez, Espinal, and McGuire. So with news that Vlad is in, is that going to change any of you wanting to get to cheaper pitching options because you have him to pay up for?
Yeah, we're going to find out in this next run. I'm way over the field on Vlad. He's always a guy that I will one-off. I will play individually. I like playing him and Bichette next to each other in 5-2s. I think that's something I've been doing a lot this season. It's been pretty darn nifty. It's not failed me yet. I'm going to continue to do that going forward. You generally need to have some cheaper pitchers to go alongside with that. But it might pop up my Marquez ownership a little bit more. And then it also might pop up a little bit of my Morton ownership. I was kind of planning on being a little bit lower on him as well. But yeah, I'm definitely going to make room for the best hitter in baseball at this point in time.
Just one more pitcher I want to bring up before we move on is I am getting to Rich Hill, overweight to the field. Rich Hill only projected for 11% ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Rich Hill projected for 8% ownership, also 8,300 price tag, favorable matchup against the Seattle Mariners. I've made fun of Rich Hill to the point that I've been called an ageist quite a bit this year, which, I mean, listen, I'm friends with EMAC. I make fun of him for being old. So maybe there's a point there. But look, Rich Hill, very old, 41 years old. And I assumed he was done last year. His velocity dipped in a major way, 87.9 average fastball velocity last year. That was down from 90.4 the year before. He did have a 3.03 ERA last year, but a 5.1 FIP. And all that to me was just leading to think like, hey, Rich Hill, a guy whose strikeout rate tanked in a major way all the way down to below 20% last year. I just thought he was done. And now this year, the velocities come back up. So now he's at 89 miles per hour, pretty much in line with his career average, 3.38 ERA, 3.94 FIP for the year. Also, the strikeout rate up to 25.9%. So looks like there's still a little bit left in Rich Hill. It's always a little bit of a concern how deep he's going to be allowed to work into games. But just given how he's, relatively cheap on FanDuel and then DraftKings, the lower ownership on him, and that I'm not totally confident in some of the other options, I have Rich Hill in around 20% of my lineups, and that has me a little bit overweight to him. So are you playing Rich Hill at all?
I've got a little bit, not at the field, but Rich Hill, I mean, this is the Tampa Bay effect. Tampa Bay does this with pitchers. They know what they're doing. It's kind of like the Houston effect, I would say, in a lot of ways, where they just kind of figure it out for guys. And Rich Hill's always had to figure it out. He's 41. He's been around the block a number of times. Dodgers, good landing spot. Was great with my Twins in limited run there. But yeah, Rich Hill, no problem getting there. Just a little bit more expensive. And I'm already paying up for more Woodruff. I'm already a little bit lower and going down to Marquez and Morton now. But I can see why you want to get there. Just not going to be a crazy stand of mine today.
All right. And that pretty much does it for all the pitchers. I'm right now refreshing my lineups to make sure I have Vlad in, making sure I get my Toronto Blue Jays stacks all sorted in order. It would have been nice if the game that started first on the slate wouldn't be like the last one we need a lineup for. The only other team that we need a lineup for is the Los Angeles Angels. And, I actually kind of think that is a good spot to talk about offenses. But first, guys, if you want to get access to all of the tools that we have over at Awesemo, you could sign up for an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for just $29.95. Or if you're just looking for MLB content, go use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock. That is MLB Live Before Lock. That will get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus. Which, by the way, I just realized, why is it worded in that order? Like, why we should just start, right? Use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock, and you get the 25% off, and we don't even have to talk about the other one up top. So, hey, if you're going to use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock, you get the discount. But if you are only looking for the MLB package, $15.95 for the MLB DFS package. So stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. So anyway, what I was going to say about the Angels, the only other team on the slate that we do not yet have a lineup for. But one thing that we do know is that even if Shohei Ohtani's in the lineup, not eligible as a hitter, he's not going to accrue hitting points on Fanduel or Draftkings. Does that impact how you view the Angels as a potential stack?
Yeah, I'm not going to stack them. That's kind of what I've decided. I'm going to have 2 and 3 mans of them as the complementary pieces to my 5 mans. But I was talking with Spags this morning, and yeah, it's frustrating that you can't play Ohtani because he's just such a big component of what you get for production from that team if you're going to stack them up. And it's important. It's going to help the other hitters around him just to have him there in the 2-hole. It's going to be a benefit for Iglesias or Walsh or whoever ends up being 3-4 in that spot. Max Stassi has been in and out of the 3-hole as well. I don't really care. I think really it's the top end of that order because as soon as you get to like Taylor Ward, Philip Gosselin, all these other guys, let me just pull up the numbers that I had for them from this morning. I mean, it's not a good hitting team on the back end of that lineup. Lagares, slugging 376, Iglesias 378, even hitting at the 3-hole, just not going to be very good. Part of why he's up there is he just doesn't get K'd that much, can possibly just get on base and help out for Walsh and for Stassi behind him there. Stassi, the biggest bat right now, 566 slugging, slugging on the season. I don't mind getting to a bunch of those guys as like 2 and 3 mans, but there's just no way that I'm going to stack the back half of this lineup anymore.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that also is important, so if you look at our top stacks, which, by the way, is free today, we do have actually, I'm going to refresh this because there's a good chance we just got an update here now. The Blue Jays lineup is out. But anyway, we do have the Angels as one of the better and under-owned stack options on DraftKings today. And then on FanDuel, we also have the Angels as a pretty favorable team to stack. We have them with an 8.4% chance to be the top stack, only a 5% ownership share. The issue is that with no Ohtani there, it kind of throws off all the numbers, right? Because let's say, Angels 8% chance of being the top scoring team on the day. That's totally reasonable. But what are the odds that Ohtani's a part of that and we don't get his points for fantasy? So it kind of screws with all the numbers a little bit. So I'm actually even a little bit underweight to the field on the Angels, even though we have them as graded out as really positively leveraged, just because I can't get their best hitter in the lineup. That, and it appears that Anthony Rendon isn't going to be playing tonight. So those two things combined, and the Angels aren't that appealing of an option to me, at least not what the data shows. So I'm kind of in line with you where it's not a team that looks all that appealing with Rendon potentially not playing and then Ohtani not getting hitting points. So ultimately, we're just going to be rostering a bunch of crappy Angels hitters. And it might be like, hey, this team scores 7 runs, but Ohtani homered and his fantasy points don't do any good for us. So that's really the issue I have there.
The worst. Yeah, and also I just noticed Teoscar Hernandez was not in that lineup, correct?
Correct.
Because he's on paternity list. He's having a baby. Yeah, that's cute. Well, congratulations, Teoscar. He doesn't care. He's not watching us.
Hey, you never know. What if he's
having a child?
Yeah. What if he's in the delivery room? And he's like, you know what I'm going to do to pass the time? Watch MLB Live Before
DraftKings lineups and get suspended. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, don't do that. But anyway, congratulations to him. That's fantastic. But now I have to change some stuff. So there's that.
Yeah, I like how you said congratulations to him as if you're doubling back and like he is watching and he cares what we think about his personal life and that. This is some great, or what if he was sitting there and he actually was thinking about playing DFS lineups, and then he heard Eric say don't do it. He's like, guess I shouldn't. That could be an issue.
Yep, definitely in play.
All right. So other stacks now, rerunning my lineups right now. So getting a better feel for where I'm going to wind up. But let's start by talking about the Coors Field game. We do have the Brewers projected to be the top scoring team of the day on both Fanduel and Draftkings. We have them currently with about a 15% chance of being the top scoring team, 15.5 to be exact. Also going a little bit over-owned, 17.3%. But given their overall odds of being the top scoring team, and I know you also said you are on German Marquez a little bit, how are you weighing this Coors Field game and how much you want to get to it?
I'm lighter on it, and I am fine with it. I think the hitting environment is still fantastic. This is still 90 degrees Coors Field. I can't say anything to that, but I trust enough from these pitchers, even if Marquez doesn't go out and mow dudes down, which I don't think is necessarily his MO either way. 24.1% K rate on the year. Definitely, I'm more worried about the walks and possibly just keeping that line moving for the Milwaukee side, but just not going to give up a crazy amount of power, I don't think, in this spot. I mean, he has got elite numbers, 88 exit velocity on the season, 36.4% hard hit rate, and 5.7% launch angle. Like those are 5.7 degrees launch angle. I don't know why I keep doing that today, but either way, I don't mind getting to some Brewers, but it's going to be the most popular team here on the slate. And I generally try to get away from that because of the variance of baseball. I'm not a big fan of playing the chalk here in this spot. And I understand it. Like if you want to be going there, also the back half of that lineup is just not very good. Like there aren't many guys like Willie Adames is fine, but Jace Peterson, Jackie Bradley, I just have no desire to be rostering either one of them on this slate. I don't think there's really a need for me. If I'm going to be doing what everybody else is going to be doing if I play them and playing those top five. So I'm under 10% on the stack as a whole.
Yeah. So for me, it all depends on what the ownership is relative to our top stack odds. And once again, like I said before, the MLB DFS top stacks on Awesemo.com, it is free today. So you could follow along with Eric and I and see which teams are positively leveraged, what their odds are being the top scoring team, what their ownership is as a squad. But I'm always going to make a lot of my decisions based on that. And if teams are under-owned, I'm generally going to try to be overweight to them. If teams are over-owned, I generally try to reduce my ownership. So, we do have the Brewers with the best odds being the top scoring team, like I said before, and we also have them with a lot of ownership. So it's the point where I'm underweight to them, but I'm not totally off them or anything like that. To me, they're still a fairly high priority stack. It's just a stack that I want to have about 10% of the time as opposed to the 17% the field is at. They are still expensive because it's a Coors Field game, but still, I like the upside here. And German Marquez has been pretty inconsistent over the last few years. But with that said, I do think it still does make sense to get to a little bit of Marquez. I have not quite as much as you, but he's in my player pool. But also getting to the Brewers, just not quite as much as the field.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know why Matt Manning just started showing up for me on FanDuel. That is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Removed from pool. There we go. Now I feel better about everything. I can resume living my life.
Are there any individual hitters that you are getting to from the Brewers?
So individual hitters, I like Yelich. I think that if you're just looking for a guy that can possibly double dong in the spot, like I would have no problem getting to Yelich. No problem also Vogelbach. I think if you're playing cash, those would be two guys that I would be playing. I was going to play cash this morning. I ended up not playing cash. Just didn't know what it was going to be like leading up to lock here today. And that's generally the thing that I end up really kind of micromanaging as I get closer up to lock is just making sure that I've got my top projected lineup put together in the top end. And I would assume that they would both be a part of it. I think that the ownership on them would be high enough where I would just play both of those guys. They would probably be my first two batters that I would really be targeting from there out of the 2-hole and 3-hole in Coors Field, 90-degree weather up against Marquez. But I'm talking tournaments, and that's where the Marquez play really comes in handy. I wouldn't mind getting to some Garcia. I definitely don't want to be playing Luis Urias as somebody who was earlier coming in as a one-off in just about everything I was doing. I try to not have chalkier batters, especially from chalkier teams, as my one-off in this spot. I just don't really find him to be that appealing of a bat. I don't think it's going to kill me not to have him a part of anything. At 4K, I understand that he slides in easily with the stack, but because I won't be stacking him up as much, definitely not the guy I want to be getting a one-off of.
Yeah, one thing that's a little tricky about the Brewers here is a lot of times we see these Coors Field games, like it happened with the Padres the other day, where they were super popular, but there were still guys that I thought were reasonable plays towards the end of the order that you could use to really differentiate the stack, like Jerickson Profar. One day he was 8% owned, another day he was 3% owned. Every single player in the lineup today is projected for at least 14% ownership on DraftKings. So the lowest owned player is currently Jackie Bradley Jr., but we're still looking at ownership in the teens for him. And then the ownership also, it doesn't get crazy high on anybody either. So to me, Yelich, I would expect him to be, like 30+% owned in this spot. I have slightly more of him than the 24% the field has. But I just think it's kind of crazy that we have this entire team projected for between 14 and 24% ownership. And just the field is kind of flat on these guys. Like, I would think that Yelich would pick up considerably more ownership than Jace Peterson at the end of the order. I understand that he has second base eligibility. He's cheap, but it's just kind of weird to me to see the ownership so flat across the team. And that does make it hard to differentiate with Brewer stacks. But other side of the game, Rockies, we're both on Brandon Woodruff. We've talked about that. Do you have any interest in Rockies stacks, though, just given that the game is played at altitude in Denver?
Yeah, so earlier they were like underneath 5%. I don't know what they finished at. Yeah, 6%. I think that's about right. I'm at the field on that number. I was a little bit over when it was 3-4% this morning, and I think that it's moved up to about where it should be. I still think because Woodruff, it's not even just Woodruff. You have, you could go 5 innings and then you get the Milwaukee bullpen there for a little bit in Coors as well. There's enough upside in this hitting environment that I have no issues ever playing both sides of it, especially when I am this invested over the field on a guy, especially compared to where he's at ownership wise right now. I think having a leverage stack or two makes a lot of sense on this slate.
Yeah, just because of the amount of ownership I have on Woodruff, I'm getting to the Rockies just because I'm concerned. It's a game at Coors Field, and I play 150 lineups for baseball. I don't want it to be where if Woodruff struggles, because that's not a crazy unlikely scenario pitching in Colorado. I would like to have at least a couple of bullets where it's like, hey, maybe I just have one lineup that ends up hitting the nuts of the stack. So we currently have them being appropriately owned, 5.1% chance of being a top stack, 5.5% ownership share. So if you get to 3, 4, 5% of the Rockies, no issue with that. Especially playing Woodruff, I think that makes for good leverage against yourself, a good little hedge there as kind of a just in case. I think for basketball, that's not really how I go and build my lineups. But for baseball, I don't have an issue with it because there's so much variance to it. What offenses? I know that you mentioned you really like the Blue Jays, but what offenses are you targeting the heaviest? Is it Toronto?
Toronto and the Yankees, both are coming across with positive leverage. I guess now Toronto's basically flat, 7.9% chance of being the top stack on DK. And then I believe 8.4% for ownership share now. So I feel good about going overweight massively to both of those teams. I mean, the Yankees, it's very rare that you're going to get a positive leverage situation. And there are just so many guys who can just smoke the ball. I'm definitely prioritizing all of the usual heavy hitters on that team. And that's part of playing Marquez too, is that it's not so hard to go Stanton, Judge, play a lot of these guys, mix and match a bunch of dudes and kind of like take your shots from there. Gleyber Torres, I think, is going to start heating up a little bit here. DJ LeMahieu, it's been disappointing, only 4 homers on the season, but this is a smaller ballpark. I think that there's a big streak coming. I don't really factor in hot streaks, cold streaks. It's not part of what I do, but I just think DJ LeMahieu, what we've seen over the course of this year, he's going to have some positive regression in his side. And then Gary Sanchez, I mean, that whole top 5 mixing and matching, Brett Gardner not being in the 9 hole is definitely an upgrade there. 3K over on DK. That's a guy that I'm overweight to the field too. Really like that entire game. It's going to be a big part of whether or not I win money tonight.
Yeah, this is my most roster team today, which, hey, listen, worst case scenario, I'm going to be looking well the first 30 minutes of the slate because I have a lot of exposure to the Yankees. I'm about neutral to the field on the Blue Jays now because that ownership's come up in a pretty big way. Although there's a chance that because the lineup came out so late, the field won't actually be as heavy on Toronto as some of the ownership projections indicate. But yeah, the Yankees we have is the most positive leverage stack on the slate. And, it's funny. We've seen this with a lot of the Yankees this year where people are really hot and cold on the Yankees where it's like, hey, they start to play well. And all of a sudden the Yankees are projected for like a 25% ownership share when they have a 10% chance to be a top stack. And then the Yankees struggle a little bit and all of a sudden everybody jumps off them. But more often than not, we've seen this year, when the Yankees are negatively leveraged, they have bad days. And when they're really positively leveraged, that's when they've had some of their best days. So the Yankees, to me, today, this is a spot where I'd want to get to a team with this kind of leverage score anyway, but a 13.7% chance being a top stack, only a 10% ownership share on DraftKings. Then on FanDuel, the Yankees have a little more neutral, 14-14 on both sides. But at least for DraftKings, I mean, this is a team I'm prioritizing very heavily. I think there's a lot of hitters that I really want to get to. Actually, look at my individual ownership. I am overweight to every single hitter in the Yankees lineup. There's not a single hitter that I am even or underweight with the field on. But which hitter for the Yankees is popping up in most of your lineups?
Oh, Stanton. I just have a crazy amount of Stanton. And then Brett Gardner, just because 3K allows me to kind of mix and match with some of the more expensive builds that I have, just kind of going through my entire portfolio. I think I might actually, as I'm finishing all my Toronto stuff here, I think I might be overweight to every single batter in this entire game outside of Tyler Wade.
Let's see. So Tyler Wade, I am overweight to Tyler Wade. He's currently projected for 3. He's projected for about 4% ownership, and I have 6. So even him, I'm overweight to. The Toronto side of the game. Let's see.
Everybody but Espinal is the only guy. 2.2K. I don't really need it at this point in time. I'm overweight to every single batter.
Hey, I don't have any issue with that. It's I think this is one of the better games to target for sure. And listen, worst case scenario, somebody hits an early home run, somebody gets a single in the game, you're in first place 3 minutes into the slate, and you could go screenshot it and go spend your money, and then come back, like do what I did, get all excited about the Philadelphia 76ers last night and assume it's a win, and then forget about it and come back and just go, whoa, that went poorly.
Oh no, that's not a fun day.
No, well, actually, so it wasn't any pregame bets. I bet the 76ers in that series when Embiid first got ruled in for game 1. And I thought, like, hey, as long as Embiid's healthy, there's no way they would lose this series. And that team is totally falling apart. But that aside, we have got about 10 minutes left in the show. So let's talk about some other stacks. First, we've talked about some of the teams we really like a lot, but relative to ownership, is there any team that's going really low owned that you're prioritizing heavily?
Let me see. Let me pull up the top stacks tool because I know what I've got for my team exposure here. I'll see kind of where it's at as I'm finishing up this Toronto stuff, which is just really, really fun. I didn't know Teoscar Hernandez that was going to be that big of a pain in the ass, but definitely lower on the Angels. Teams that I like compared to where their ownership's coming at. I mean, we've talked about the Yankees. You're in just such a good spot going overweight to the Yankees, and that's a rarity for me that I get to roster them at will like this, and so I'm going to do it. Same thing kind of exists. So the one team that we haven't talked about is Detroit, and I am definitely over the field on the Detroit bats as well. So it's not just a leverage situation with Shohei Ohtani, but as good as he's been, he doesn't necessarily get the chases that you would expect. He's really a pitching contradiction to me in a lot of ways because he can rack up the Ks at will. Also a massive walk rate on the entire season here as I'm pulling up Shohei. 14% walk rate, gives up that 43% hard hit percentage. Definitely can limit some of like the expected batting average is under 2. That's ridiculous, or under 200. That's ridiculous. But as good as his 34% K percentage can be, there are times that he's going to get knocked around. It's going to happen. And I'm going to be overinvested on a Detroit team that I think has enough power in enough spots here in this lineup. Obviously, this is a team that's going to strike out a bunch too. Everything kind of matches up for why Shohei has the ownership he does. But Eric Haas hasn't hit a home run for 7 games. I'm seeing right now for everything. He's one of the highest, like one of the biggest bats in the league. Obviously, it's a very limited sample size, but 58.1% hard hit percentage. That's no joke. Miguel Cabrera, we know the kind of ability he has to smoke a baseball. Hasn't been as good the last couple of years. Of course, though, it's Miguel Cabrera. He can knock anything around at any point. And then Jonathan Scope is a guy that I know Alex has talked about being one of the better power hitters historically for this team. Robbie Grossman at the top of the order doesn't walk a lot. Same with Heimer Candelario. Both of them, they end up generating walks at a higher clip. So I think there's an opportunity for Shohei to maybe get knocked up a little bit here. And then you get to that Angels bullpen. Sign me up for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, of the low-owned teams, the Tigers are the one that I have the most exposure to, and it's twofold. And it's a lot of the same reasons you already said, but kind of the same thought process where it's, so the Detroit Tigers, we currently only have projected for 2% ownership share. Ohtani is also chalk pitcher on the slate, and he's been somebody who's had a good amount of variance to him for a couple of reasons. And both things that you mentioned also, high walk rate and also gives up a lot of hard contact. Also, if you look at his underlying numbers, he seems like somebody who's heading towards regression. 2.85 ERA, but a 3.62 expected ERA, 3.41 FIP. Those are still solid numbers, but given how much hard contact he's given up, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a guy who ultimately for his career ends up underperforming his peripheral stats if he's going to continue to walk this many guys and give up this much hard contact. So, Ohtani is clearly an overall special, very talented player. I'm getting plenty of exposure to him as a pitcher today, but I think hedging and getting exposure to him, getting exposure against him with the Tigers makes a lot of sense, just because I think there are always going to be starts where Ohtani's just going to come out. He's going to pitch like 3 innings and walk 6 guys, and the Angels are just going to be really cautious with him and pull him out early. I think there's always that kind of variance with them, and I do think that the Tigers make for the best leverage stack on the slate.
God, we are kind of on the same wavelength here. That's good to hear.
And then how much relative to the other teams you're stacking, are you getting to them a lot or just kind of more than the field?
The other teams. So, I mean, I'm so heavy on the Yankees, so heavy on right now. The Yankees and Toronto, we've talked about that ad nauseum, about at the field on so many of these other teams. There's a couple that I've kind of written off. So I'm over the field on Houston at the same time that I'm overweight to Dylan Cease, which isn't that hard to do, as you said, at 1%. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Tampa Bay, I'm definitely much lower on comparatively. Justin Dunn has not been good this entire season, but he's been improved. I think that there are some signs where he might actually be getting a little bit better as we go. And you talk about Tampa Bay, there is so much pinch hitting risk as soon as you get to this bullpen for the Mariners, where you bring these Tampa Bay bats that are all lefties, you know, the G-Man Choi, the Brandon Lau. I don't think Brandon Lau necessarily gets pinch hit for, but some of these other guys, Kevin Kiermaier, there's a number of dudes who I could see getting pinch hit for as this game kind of continues on. And that's just a bad situation to try to get 2 or 3 at bats out of some of these dudes to try to compete with the likes of the Yankees or the Toronto Blue Jays, where I don't have those kind of concerns.
All right. Any stacks that we have not brought up yet that are an important piece of your lineup construction you think we should bring up?
Not really. I'm slightly overweight to Cincinnati, just well, more so the 3-man. I'm kind of matching a couple of these lefties. I'm around 5% on Naquin, 8% on Jesse Winker, 5% Joey Votto. So I'm just kind of targeting a couple lefties here against Joe Musgrove, just in the event that he gives up 1 or 2 shots here. But that's kind of just a back end portfolio mix and match of those guys, where I want to be overweight to the individual bats, but not the stack as a whole.
All right. And by the way, guys, if you have any questions, fire them in and we could answer them. I know Jimmy Bloomfield is in here. He's been asking us a lot about the FanDuel pitcher exposure. So, by the way, I think we could do that right now. We haven't gone over the pitchers for a little while. Maybe people joined late, but do us a favor, guys, since I haven't asked for likes yet. Like the video, also subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, subscribe to the Awesemo Podcast Network. I'm going to refresh our ownership projections here, and I'll give out the top 5 most exposed pitchers on FanDuel and DraftKings today. So on DraftKings, the chalk is Joe Musgrove, currently projected for 50.4% ownership. Shohei Ohtani, 45.6%. Charlie Morton, 33.2%. Marcus Stroman, 24%. Rich Hill, 10.4%. So of those guys, Eric, just quick synopsis. Which guys do you think which guy do you think is going the most over-owned there?
Most over-owned Joe Musgrove by leaps and bounds, and it's not remotely close.
All right. Well, it is Marcus Stroman for me, because I at least have Joe Musgrove in my player pool, and I'm not getting to Marcus Stroman really at all at 24% ownership now at this point. So to me, Stroman, not enough strikeout upside for me to want to roster him. And then Jimmy's question, which was FanDuel specific, but wanted to get out the DraftKings ones anyway. But FanDuel, a lot of the similar names. Joe Musgrove, 38.2%, heading above everybody else in terms of FanDuel ownership, single pitcher site. Charlie Morton, 14.5%. Marcus Stroman, 10.3%. Rich Hill, 8.1%. Shohei Ohtani, 7.7%. And then Eric, I'll set you up here because it's something I know your answers, but which pitcher do you think is going most under-owned on both sites today?
Not going to lie, I thought we were already talking about FanDuel, and I kind of tuned out for the rest of your question. Marcus Stroman is the answer on DraftKings. It is definitely Joe Musgrove on FanDuel, so flip-flop the two in terms of what I was talking about. Marcus Stroman, the most over-owned on DK, and I don't think it's close at this point in time, just because I think that there's enough upside as we continue to dig into some of these arms and looking at the lineups coming out, where I don't want to really be there on DK. But on FanDuel, Joe Musgrove, just way over-owned compared to his opportunity to be the top pitcher. It's a single pitcher site. I really like getting to Woodruff. I really like getting to Ohtani. Mix and match those two way above 10K and get different.
Yep, totally agree. Brandon Woodruff is overall the best pitcher to me on the slate today. The risk here is obviously he's playing in Coors Field, but on the positive side, the Rockies have a bad offense. They suck against right-handed pitching. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Woodruff to have a big game, especially relative to that ownership projection. Currently projected now 4.6% ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Brandon Woodruff projected for less than 1% ownership, now 0.9%. I think that is the guy that makes the most sense to be overweight to the field on. So just a few minutes left, guys. If you have questions, fire them in and we'll answer them. But other than that, Eric, which offenses do you think for today are going the most over-owned?
Definitely Tampa Bay for me. Tampa Bay's just way too high for me. I'm not going to be getting to Tampa Bay in any kind of a meaningful way. Let's see, who else did I really kind of lower? I'm way lower on Milwaukee as well. And that's just kind of my natural proclivity to be lower on whatever the top offense of the day is going to be, especially when they're going a little bit overowned, especially when I do like the other side of the game and I see a path for a guy like German Marquez at 5,500. I already said I'm going to be overinvested to him. So I don't see really a need for me to also be, have 25% or 20% of my lineups with Marquez and then 25 or 20% of Milwaukee. That would make a whole lot of no sense to me. So I definitely think Milwaukee, Tampa Bay, the two highest owned teams on this slate, I'm going to be lower on.
All right. So just a minute left here, and then we are going to be signing off. So let's close out today's show with some home run picks. So Eric, here's going to be the rules. Pick whatever guy you think is most likely to home run today, with the caveat being it can't be somebody at Coors Field because that's kind of like cheating. So home run pick, who do you think is the guy most likely to homer today?
Vlad. Just give me Vlad.
All right. So Vlad, who, by the way, home run prop for Vlad, you can get him for up to plus 360 are his current odds to hit a home run. So that is not a bad number relative to Vlad, especially that, what's actually really weird about that? Rowdy Tellez is plus 350. Marcus Semion's plus 340. Like Randall Grichuk is plus 340. Why is Vlad available? I assume you didn't even know what those numbers were, but to me, if you're going to bet somebody, Vlad's hit more home runs than anybody in baseball. It makes no sense that he's available at plus 360 to hit a homer today.
Yeah, and then Rowdy Tellez is in the 7 hole as opposed to Vlad in the 3 hole, so he gets more opportunity. That really would make less than 0 sense to me.
All right, I am going to pick a hitter who you said you liked earlier, and that is Giancarlo Stanton. Giancarlo Stanton. This is a bullpen game for the Blue Jays. TJ Zike, I don't expect to pitch very deep into the game, but Giancarlo Stanton has absolutely crushed left-handed pitching for most of his career, and he is available for as good as plus 220 to hit a home run on the prop market today. So Giancarlo Stanton, that is my home run pick. That is going to do it for us today, guys. Everybody, good luck today. Also, thank you for watching. If you've not done so already, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also, let's go Yankees, let's go Blue Jays.